Hello and welcome to the channel. As always, like the video, and if you enjoyed the story, leave a comment on if you would want more. This fan fiction was not created by me, but in the description there is a link to the fanfic so you can show your support to the creator and read along. Without any more delay, let's dive into the story.
The familiar sights and sounds greeted the man as he strode through his home. It was remarkable, he mused, how little managed to change in between his trips. While the outside world was constantly changing, the ever-shifting political climate creating havoc, Konoha stayed the same. The only difference was the people in it. There was a sense of timelessness to the village of his birth, and it gave the impression that no matter what, Konoha would always endure. I've been called timeless too, the man mused happily. It was always nice when people inadvertently played to his ego. The knowledge of why he had returned tempered his good spirits, and he felt slight frown fix itself on his grizzled face. Aged eyes locked on the administrative building, and his large form, already hidden from view to all but the most skilled of observers, disappeared completely. An open window greeted him at his destination and, despite his recently turned mood, he smiled. The two occupants of the room shifted their gazes the second he appeared, and it was a testament to the man's immense skill that the ever-unflappable Narashikaku looked surprised at his entry. Sarutobi remained unfazed, however. Jiraiya, the sandaime greeted. The old man's expression didn't change a whit, as if he was as unsurprised by his student's return as he was when the sun rose in the east every morning. He turned back to Shikaku. If you will, Shikaku, drop the drafted plans with the ANBU commander. You, he, and myself will be meeting tomorrow morning at 7 to discuss them. Yes, Hokage-sama, said the Nara clan head. The man rolled up a scroll that had been in between himself and the Hokage and departed. On the warpath, sensei? Jiraiya asked rhetorically. Once again, it seems, Sarutobi sighed. You're earlier than I expected. My business wrapped up quickly, was the cryptic answer. The sandaime didn't bother asking. He would undoubtedly receive the streamlined facts when Jiraiya deemed it necessary. Part of being Hokage was delegating duties, and Sarutobi had faith in his student's abilities and judgment after all the years the man had been doing his job. Not that I mind, but what brings you here? The old man filled and lit his pipe with a contented sigh, taking a long drag. Looks like you were expecting me, Jiraiya said, gesturing to the open window. Can't pay a visit to my dear old sensei? He asked innocently. Sarutobi rolled his eyes, though the smallest of smiles broke through his mask. Jiraiya inwardly cheered. The sky is clear, the air is warm, and the hot springs are open. You never come straight to me unless you have something you want to talk about, Jiraiya, so out with it. The large man sighed almost playfully, but recognized when his sensei wasn't in the mood for banter. He wasn't really in the mood for banter either. Reports from Rice Country reached me through the grapevine. He began, tone hard. Sarutobi exhaled hard, bringing his free hand to his forehead. It was always the same with Jiraiya. When he wasn't barking him up a tree about Orochimaru and how to handle him, he was constantly badgering him about training his godson. In this case, the situation in question involved both. He was caught in an unpredictable situation. In a country where you know that Orochimaru is acting openly. Jiraiya glared at his sensei. Goddammit, old man, he fucking fought him. Where I now know that Orochimaru is acting openly, the Hokage corrected. There was little evidence beyond pure speculation that he had anything to do with Otogakure and its formation. You still shouldn't have sent one of my most trusted captains in Jonin into possible enemy territory to retrieve information that has become vital to this village's defense, the old man interrupted. That Naruto happened to be on Tenzo's Genin squad was merely an unfortunate happenstance, Jiraiya. He raised a hand to forestall the Sanin's next outburst. And before you begin anew, 2 Jonin or even an ANBU squad do not go as unnoticed through the land as we would like to think. The Genin provided a shield of uncertainty to any prying eyes. Jiraiya's eyes flashed. For all the good it did. And how was I, or anyone to predict that Orochimaru would decide to liquidate the Fuma clan? And by personally leading the assault? Sarutobi shook his head. You are not new to this business, Jiraiya, and yet your judgments and feelings are so clouded by affection for a boy you hardly know. Only because you've never let me know him, Jiraiya ached to scream. He refrained, however, having no wish to rehash the decade-old argument. Not the point, sensei. He got the bastard's attention with the stunt he pulled to get his team out of there, and you and I both know that Orochimaru's at his most dangerous to someone like Naruto when he's curious. Jiraiya had his arms folded over his chest and a glare firmly fixed on his face as he leaned against the nearest wall. The odds of the two meeting in the exams are minimal at best, given what my advisors and I have planned. Your presence here greatly helps with that. The Hokage took a long drag from his newly lit pipe. And should they, I expect that Naruto's abilities will keep our old friend close. He always did have an eye for talent. Red flashed in front of the Toad Sannin's eyes. And now he's bait? He's a human being, sensei. The sound of teeth clamping around the wood of Sarutobi's pipe let Jiraiya know that he had finally pushed his sensei past his breaking point. I am happy, now, that you refused my plea to take my place as Hokage all those years ago, Jiraiya, for I am terrified at the prospect of Konoha's future. Were you leading it? The old man bit out. Despite all of your experience, you still allow your decisions to be clouded, and cannot make them objectively. Yes, Naruto was a human being, rather than simply pawn on a chessboard as you seem to suggest I view him as. He is, however, one of my shinobi, and as such has a part to play in this village's survival. If that means that he draws Orochimaru's attention and keeps him interested enough to ignore any signs of our knowledge of his plot, then so be it. Jiraiya leaned back subconsciously at the harsh rebuke, reminded once more that this was the man who had led Konoha to the top of the shinobi world through 2.5 wars. Orochimaru's greatest weakness has always been his curiosity in the face of an intriguing specimen, Sarutobi continued, though he was far less heated. Any advantage is to be exploited here, and I intend to do so. The large man sighed heavily, letting the argument fall. He knew there was no convincing his sensei once he had set his mind to a course of action. It didn't mean he had to like it. And how do I factor into these war games of yours? The Sannin asked wearily, though he already had an idea. Sarutobi leaned back, taking a drag and finally happy that the Naruto topic had been pushed aside for the moment. Both I and my advisors believe that Orochimaru will execute his plan during the final phase of the exams, with the aid of Tsunagakure and their Jinchuriki. Jiraiya nodded. His own informants had been crucial in unveiling the plot. So which of the two am I going to have to fight? The father or the son? He asked. There was never any doubt that Orochimaru would seek out and attempt to assassinate the Hokage. It was only a matter of when and how. I would have you fight both, were it conceivably possible, Sarutobi admitted. But alas, the odds of both the Kazekage and his son being in the same vicinity are slim to none. I expect that my counterpart will be leading his own troops, whilst young Gaara will be used to sow confusion. The Kazekage will be your target. Masa's grown some since he was given the seat, I suppose. Could be fun, Jiraiya declared with a smile that wasn't entirely forced. Sarutobi allowed himself a moment of humor at the amount of confidence his student could show when he was tasked with killing a sitting Kage. It went unsaid that the sensei had just as much faith as the student that he would succeed. Despite Jiraiya's failings as an objective leader, he was unquestionably powerful. And the Ichibi? The Sannin asked. The Sandaime sighed once more, a growing habit, at what was going to become a point of much contention. Containment is all but impossible without either myself or you dealing with the beast, but thankfully Sabaka no Gaara is still far from the most capable of Jinchuriki. The Sannin waited patiently, having gotten used to his sensei being long-winded decades ago. Get on with it already, he pleaded. He'll be matched up against the most capable Konoha genin when he reaches the finals dash. You mean Naruto? Jiraiya interrupted hastily. He felt the stirrings of his anger once more. There's a possibility that either Hyuga Neji or Uchiha Sasuke will prove themselves in the second exam. Right, and all the big five are gonna end up as allies in a war. Sensei, don't bullshit a bullshitter. Jiraiya exclaimed. Me and you both know that Naruto's gonna be the one to fight the Ichibi container, so cut the crap. The big man sighed as he finally dropped into a chair across from the Hokage's desk. Indeed he is, Jiraiya, Sarutobi placated. But he will not be alone. You may not recall, but one of Orochimaru's old experiments with the Shodai's chakra yielded one positive result. His suppression skills have yet to be tested, the Hokage said simply. He has shown remarkable control over the Shodai's ninjutsu considering he was not born with the talent, prodigious skill really, but we've never had the opportunity to test what was the most potent of my sensei's abilities. Subduing Sabaka no Gara will be his task and his alone, but to have a Jinchuriki of our own to support him only makes sense. The matchup will allow for Naruto to be close at hand in the opening stages should Tenzo fail. Jiraiya made a face at the term for his godson, but smothered his displeasure. So I take it this is why I was recalled? Sarutobi nodded solemnly. Indeed. He'll need training, for even as competent as Naruto is, I don't wish to leave him at the mercy of Gaara's madness should something prevent Tenzo from acting. The Sannin shook his head. And you can't think of anything better than matching Naruto up with an unstable container? Surely there's another option. Jiraiya flinched as Sarutobi's arms were thrown skyward. And what would you have me do instead? My Jonin all need to be in strategic locations to help command the Chunin when the battle begins, and BU will be stretched thin with their own assignments, and all of this is to be kept absolutely secret for us to have any hope of survival. The Sandaime stood abruptly and strode to his window that overlooked the village. There are no good options, Jiraiya. There is no great upside to any possible scenario involving the Ichibi that doesn't leave the village unacceptably vulnerable in some other way. There's always assassination, Jiraiya murmured without feeling. You know as well as I that it's not plausible. Any attack on the container would be considered an act that would potentially drag us into a fourth Great War, Sarutobi sighed. The same holds true for an attack on the Kazekage, and the possibility of both finding and eliminating Orochimaru before the battle is non-existent. The Sannin shook his head. He's really outdone himself on this one, hasn't he? Sarutobi said nothing in response. Naruto was starting to think that he'd jinxed the team. His foot lashed out, crushing the useless heaven scroll into dust with chakra. Third fucking time, he mentally groused. You guys done? He called. Just finished, came Kiba's reply. The two remaining Team 10 genin appeared from behind a tree, where they had been securing the three hapless wannabes they had just robbed. Naruto strode over to check their handiwork. All three were bound against separate tree trunks so tightly that not even the greatest of escape jutsu would help them. The blonde boy patted the cheek of one of the unconscious genin, and nodded in satisfaction when the boy's head simply rolled from one side to the other. They were out cold, and would remain so for some time. They'll be sitting ducks, Ino said hesitantly. Naruto shook his head in response. So were the last two teams. We've left them hidden, and it's not like any of them have something to offer anyone else at this point, the boy pointed out. Team 10 had taken the first heaven scroll for insurance, and had destroyed the scrolls of the second two teams they had found. The fewer competitors the better. Let's roll out. Kiba? Yeah, Naruto. We've got it. The dog ninja and his partner both flared their nostrils. Their eyes closed subconsciously, and their heads turned seemingly of their own volition before coming to rest facing due east. Got one. Straight east, 1.5 clicks away, Kiba said quietly. It was always startling to watch the usually loud-mouthed boy focus himself so intently, but Naruto was beginning to get used to it. The blonde, unofficial team leader formed a cross-shaped hand seal, and 3 Kage Bunshin formed in front of him. The blondes, clad in the same black pants, shirt, and vest of Naruto himself, disappeared without a word, moving to scout the team that Kiba had identified. Let's roll, Naruto ordered, and the three took off through the tree branches at a run. Kiba and Akamaru led, with Naruto and Ino bringing up the rear in a triangle formation. The trees flashed by them as the three genin hopped from branch to branch without a word. Suddenly, Naruto's eyes narrowed as the memory from one of his clones presented itself. 3 Amigakure Genin. My clones were discovered and engaged them. Kiba, switch out, Naruto commanded. The Inuzuka and Akamaru fell back as Naruto leapfrogged them to take point in the formation. The second of his clones dispelled, filling Naruto's head with images of sunbon needles and oil spread around a ground-level clearing. They managed to kill one. They're dangerous. Kiba, Ino, fall out of formation and come around from the north and south, ordered Naruto. Targets are in a clearing half a click away. I'll blitz from here. Wait a 3 count before you enter, and give them all you've got. The blonde spared his teammates a backwards glance and received a nod from both, before he burst forward in an explosive shunshin. The surrounding branches and leaves blurred to brown and green just as Naruto's final clone dispelled to give him cover. The speed jutsu was as loud as could be chakra-wise, but the trio of aim genin were both off balance and had no time to react as Naruto charged into their midst like the maelstrom he was named for. There were no words spoken as the Jinchuriki quite simply snatched one of the 3 by the back of his neck, and ran him bodily into a tree trunk. Blood spattered as the boy's nose was crushed and his face was hacked apart by the unmoving bark. The blonde let him drop without a word, watching dispassionately as the unconscious genin fell to the forest floor without a word. Naruto turned to face the remaining team, making a cross-shaped seal as he did. His face was blank, and the aim genin had no warning as 2 clones swept their legs from behind. His blue eyes barely had the time to register the unadulterated shock in the 2 boys' eyes before Kiba ruthlessly pounded one into the ground with his tsuga, and the other dropped to the forest floor with a muted scream as Ino sliced his Achilles tendons. A grim smile crossed Naruto's face at the sight of his teammates' effectiveness, and couldn't help the slight swirl of satisfaction that settled in his stomach at his plan coming together perfectly. It was tempered by the sight of Kiba's target broken and bleeding, unable to make a sound because his rebreather had been shoved back into his jaw at impact. Blood leaked from where the metal had roughly cut into the boy's flesh, dripping into the dirt. Ino had hauled her target to his feet and propped him against a branch, a line of blood trickling from his forehead where the Yamanaka had brained him with the blunt end of a kunai. The girl patted him down quickly, searching clothing and equipment pouches for any sign of Team 10's quarry. I got nothing, she stated quietly as she turned to Naruto and Kiba. Her eyes were shadowed, the usual seafoam color reduced to a muted gray in frustration. Same, said Kiba, who had just finished searching his own target. The aim genin was clearly unconscious, but bleeding profusely from numerous wounds the dog ninja had inflicted. That left Naruto, and the blonde turned to check his target. Got it, he declared with a slight smile, satisfaction coloring his voice. About damn time. The blonde pumped his fist once in elation, plans already forming about how to get his team to the tower before nightfall. Still, the first day might be a fucking record. Naruto, Ino called, her voice troubled. The sound of his name broke the boy's inward cheering, and he turned to see his teammates huddled around the fallen form of the boy Kiba had wrecked. What's up? Naruto trotted over, eyes peeled for any and all incoming hostiles. Only the rustling of the trees greeted his keen blue gaze. Ino shook her head as he approached. This one's bad, she said quietly, gesturing to the fallen aim genin. She didn't need to tell Naruto for him to know. The boy was sprawled, both arms pointing where they shouldn't have been, and his left leg at a near 90-degree angle. He's bleeding internally, like a shit ton. She trailed off helplessly, gesturing wildly at the unconscious genin. How's his heartbeat? Naruto asked quickly. He shot a quick glance at Kiba, only to find the boy staring resolutely at what had been his target. His face was hard, but his eyes betrayed him. He didn't mean to do this, Naruto realized instantly. The Inuzuka techniques were famous for their destructive power, and this was often the result. A body, broken and bleeding. More often than not it was unintentional on the part of the user. Slow, was all Ino said. Naruto felt a cold swooping sweep through him. You got any medical experience? The blonde boy asked his teammates at large. He already knew the answer. Just CPR, was the simultaneous response. He nodded. All right, you two go tie up the other 2. I'll see what I can do for him. He glanced meaningfully at Ino, who nodded once, subdued. His fellow blonde rose purposefully. "Come on, Kiba," she said, lightly grasping the dog ninja by the arm and steering him towards the other two unconscious genin. Akamaru followed dutifully at their heels, a chorus of yips that were undoubtedly meant to cheer his partner up echoing through the clearing. Naruto shook his head silently, surveying the damage Kiba had done to the boy. God damn. He remembered his own pain at the hands of his feral teammate back in Wave Country, and was inwardly thankful that he hadn't been nearly as damaged. He had faith in the Kyuubi's ability to heal him, but he would have been debilitated nonetheless. The cold feeling had only intensified as his eyes raked over the form of the down genin, even though he had already been set on his course of action. There was nothing he could do. He had just as much medical training as Kiba and Ino. Naruto's right hand slipped into the unconscious genin's weapons pouch and withdrew a single sunbon. With a sigh, the blonde gripped it tightly and drove it into the boy's chest cavity, right through the heart. The blonde genin formed two clones with a quick hand seal, and they picked the dead wannabe Chunin up from both ends. Naruto approached his teammates from behind. Kiba's sharp ears picked up his footsteps first. "Done, then?" he asked quietly. "Yeah." The two clones set the body down next to the two still live examinees, who were propped against a tree trunk. "Fucking A," the dog ninja muttered through clenched teeth. Naruto gripped him by the shoulder. "Nothing you could a done, Kiba." The blonde pulled his teammate to his feet, exchanging a nod with Ino. His fellow blonde put the finishing touches on the knots tying remaining genin together, before rising and joining them. The Inuzuka nodded. "I know, man. But it's just, fuck." Naruto spared him a sympathetic look. "I know how you feel, Kiba, but there's nothing we can do about it now. Just gotta keep moving to the tower." "I got it, Naruto." Kiba's eyes hardened. "Let's roll out, yeah." "Yeah. Let's move," Naruto ordered quietly. The trio turned northeast and bounded forward into the tree line. // The central tower in Training Ground 44 was old, very old in fact. It had been erected by the Shodai to serve as an outpost for high-ranking officials in the midst of First Great Shinobi War, and a command post should Konoha ever be overrun due to an invasion. The training ground's 10-kilometer radius provided ample cover, and the topmost of the 5 levels was equipped with all the tools the Hokage might need to govern Konoha and its ninja in exile, should the unthinkable happen. Tunnels that stretched from under the Hokage monument and the administrative building served as a Hokage's route to safety. Somewhat ironically, due to Konoha's long-standing position at the top of the shinobi world's pecking order, the tower's facilities had deteriorated from disuse. Wood that had once stood stronger than iron was supplemented by steel bars that jutted out at odd angles on the lower levels. Firm cables ran the length of the hallways, both on the ceiling and the floor, supporting and keeping the tower's shape where the steel supports would have made it buckle under their weight. As ugly as the tower might have been compared to its former glory, Naruto had to admit that the haphazard repairs translated into a plethora of hiding places and vantage points. The gap between the cabling, beams, and the original wood was often large enough for Naruto to squat comfortably, and while the gaps sometimes were too small for that, he only needed them for a few seconds at most. He could tolerate slight discomfort if it yielded results. That, however, was the sticking point, and Naruto made no assumptions about whether or not he would succeed. The blonde stifled a grunt of exertion as he leveraged himself into a nook on the right side of the hallway that almost completely concealed his body from the rest of the hallway. The blonde's left arm shook with exertion, pressed as it was against a jutting steel beam, to push his body flush with the wall. Naruto relied on physical strength alone, compressed as his chakra was to avoid detection. He gritted his teeth as his right arm snaked out and parted a grouping of support cables and electrical wires that hid his body from sight. "Gotcha," he cheered triumphantly. The sight of Yukushi Kabuto silently padding down the third-floor hallway greeted him from between the wiring. The silver-haired Genin's team had arrived earlier that day, the 5th day, alongside Team 7. After a brief encounter with a surly Sasuke that had left Naruto even more curious than he had been before, the blonde had been in full-blown stealth mode, searching for any opportunity to gather information on the mysterious youth. It had come, and Naruto thanked Yamato and the Sandaime even more for their decision to teach him the Kage Bunshin. It truly was invaluable. With it and a few other techniques he had been working on, his stealth was at an all-time high, and was only growing better. He let himself fall to the hallway floor as Kabuto rounded a corner, a slight inflection of chakra making it silent. Acting quickly, he formed the tiger seal, and steadily pushed his chakra to his skin level. The disturbing sensation of eggs being broken all over his skin made him shudder, and Naruto let loose his breath as he felt the life force settle. He raised his right arm to eye level, noting with satisfaction that it looked all but invisible. A scowl crossed his unseen face at the slight rippling it gave off as he moved. His chakra's manipulation of the light hitting him was still in need of work. And it takes all my concentration just to get to this. As potentially advantageous as the Maisegakure no Jutsu was, it was notoriously difficult to perform, requiring pinpoint chakra control to properly manipulate the light that struck the user's body. "There's always something else to work on," the blonde lamented silently as he spared his non-existent shadow a glance before swiftly making his way to the end of the hallway. "And I'm not even close to managing the scent." Naruto peeked around the corner in time to catch a glimpse of his quarry striding through the open entrance to one of the dozen training rooms the tower boasted. A quiver of doubt crept into Naruto's mind at the other genin's destination. The training rooms, with their openness, weren't exactly prime choices for covert meetings between shady shinobi. Once more, the idea that Kabuto might in fact be an undercover ANBU member entered Naruto's mind. It would fit, given his status as a Leafnin and his proclivity towards helping the rookies. ANBU or not, Naruto mused, it's not like I'll be interfering in a mission if he's just meeting with a superior. Resolve renewed, Naruto took a deep breath and poured every ounce of his focus into his Maisegakure no Jutsu. Satisfied with his near invisibility, he leapt to the ceiling, and walked upside down to the entrance of the training room. Kabuto had descended the stairs from the balcony to the main floor, and leaned casually against the banister. Naruto grimaced, realizing that he might be in for a long wait before whoever was meeting his quarry decided to show up. He wasn't disappointed. 20 minutes ticked by Naruto's count, before a man with silky black hair wearing the garb of a Kusanine materialized from the floor. The man's pale skin seemed to absorb more light than it reflected, and a slow smile spread across thin lips as he took in his company. Kabuto chose that moment to shatter Naruto's world. Orochimaru-sama, the silver-haired genin greeted. All of Naruto's thought processes, all his theories on why Kabuto was here, who he worked for, came to a screeching halt at the name of Konoha's infamous Snake Sannin. What? The smile became a grin that was just a smidgen too toothy and yellow eyes widened, revealing slit pupils. Naruto shuddered at the wrongness of the man below him, frozen in place. Kabuto-kun, the famous criminal returned, the name of his contact rolling off his tongue. Were you followed? From his vantage point, Naruto had a clear view of half the bespectacled genin's face. Light glinted off the older boy's glasses as he adjusted them, a grin of his own forming that told the blonde interloper in no uncertain terms that it was time to leave. Of course. Shit. Naruto's brain kicked into high gear as he realized he had been made, and battle-tested reflexes fired on all cylinders as he sensed the telltale feeling of a shunshin. The blonde spun 180 degrees in the blink of an eye, and only just managed to duck out of the way of a kunai slash at his neck. Survival instincts kicking in, Naruto powered himself backwards over the railing and the edge of the balcony with a burst of chakra. Idly, the blonde noticed his cloaking jutsu had collapsed as he reached for his knuckle knives. Fingers grasped the cool metal firmly just as Naruto landed in a defensive stance, his wind chakra making itself known with explosive force. The howling element cut deep gouges into the stone tiles, and Naruto bared his teeth in anticipation. Just as a feather-light touch on his neck froze him in place. The screaming wind cut off abruptly as Naruto's chakra went haywire on itself, sending pins and needles shooting all through the genin's body. An all-encompassing numbness followed a split second after, and Naruto realized that he couldn't move a finger. What did he? Kanashibari no Jutsu, Naruto-kun, a voice that was as smooth and sweet as honey whispered into his ear. He would have shivered had he been able. Or, perhaps more accurately, my own little twist. An arm was dragged lazily across the blonde's shoulders as the man took measured steps to face his prey. The same grin that showed just a few too many teeth played across his lips in delight. "I do apologize," Orochimaru began, and his face shifted into picture-perfect contriteness. "I would, of course, prefer to have this little chat as equals, with both of us free to move as we please." The Sanin's tongue flopped out lazily as a smirk crossed his thin lips, almost as if his mouth needed to remain closed just to contain it. The pale man drew it across his lips as if he was savoring the moment before he dug into his next meal. "But I couldn't run the risk of you doing something rash," the man explained patiently, as if to a small child. "We wouldn't want you to say, 'Dispel yourself,' now would we?" Orochimaru's grin widened as Naruto's eyes tightened around the paralysis. "Certainly not," Kabuto drawled dutifully as he drew even with the snake Sannin. His eyes raked over Naruto's form with a gleam, as if sizing him up for a dissection. "Too resourceful by far," the silver-haired youth complimented. Orochimaru nodded, a throaty chuckle escaping his lips. "Coo. Too resourceful by far," he echoed. "And the Kage Bunshin. Such a wonderful ninjutsu, and for one so young to have such a grasp of it." Kabuto nodded sagely. "Quite talented. I almost didn't believe it when I found out, but with that little showing in the examination room. Ah, yes. Quite the marvelous performance that was. Poor Dosu had no idea what happened. But then their attack on you was misguided in itself, Kabuto-kun. Simpering little weaklings they are, but so eager to please. It was unexpected to be sure. Though I admit, Orochimaru-sama, I had thought you would inform them of my, allegiance." The young man turned to face his master, the question written plainly on his face in the form of raised brows. The Sannin shrugged delicately, waving off his subordinate's concerns with a wave of his hand. "One never can trust genin to perform admirably in an unfamiliar situation. Given the knowledge of your allegiance, as you put it, would have compromised their behavior, I have no doubt. You work with genin every day, do you not, Kabuto-kun? Surely you are aware of the lack of discipline most possess," he lectured. "Of course, Orochimaru-sama," Kabuto demurred. "Though their knowledge would have saved me some small trouble." The snake summoner chuckled. Naruto was all but ignored completely. "And yet you acquitted yourself so beautifully. Indeed, you managed to insert yourself into Kakashi's team's good graces so easily that even I could scarcely believe it." "Thank you, Orochimaru-sama. And how fares young Sasuke-kun?" Kabuto's face shifted from careful pride to calculating in less than an instant. "Your Juin has taken hold successfully." According to his teammate, he was unconscious for nearly 12 hours and battled a fever. The seal apparently activated when he awoke. "Kuku," Orochimaru laughed. "And so it has taken hold. Is there anything else worthy of report?" "Only that the use of ninjutsu and chakra in general causes him pain." The snake Sannin nodded absently. "A common side effect early in the assimilation process," he observed. "I must say that Sasuke-kun was certainly impressive in our encounter, though perhaps not as much as I would have liked." "Orochimaru-sama?" "Oh, he was skilled, to be sure, though he does pale in comparison." The pale man's face tightened in remembrance. "Itachi was far more talented." "Is far more talented, and I'm afraid that gap may prove to be truly insurmountable for Sasuke-kun," Orochimaru mused aloud. "Cuckoo, not that it truly matters, of course." Naruto's mind was ablaze as the two carried on their conversation. Ignored as he was, he felt the stirrings of pins and needles once more, and dared to hope that the infamous criminal's ninjutsu might be wearing off. The hope was swiftly obliterated as the legend simply reached out and poked the blonde in the nose, and the numb feeling returned. "Ah, don't think we've forgotten about you, Naruto-kun," the Sannin cooed. "Though we have been so very impolite, haven't we, Kabuto-kun?" "Quite. The young man adjusted his glasses as he regarded the Jinchuriki anew. The calculating look never faded, though a spark of interest shone brightly from behind his spectacles. It must be insulting for Naruto here, listening to us discuss his friend and not paying any attention to him. Indeed it must be. And it is unfortunate, for he is so very interesting in his own right. Why, people start to wonder about such an intriguing genin, don't they? Sneaking around at night, asking questions that can't be answered, learning things that no genin knows, Kabuto said. A smile that would have had Naruto running in fear were he able spread across the older genin's face. He gets people's attention, and then they start to ask questions of their own. The silver-haired youth began to circle the paralyzed blonde, assessing him from all sides. Who is the genin who learns Chunin and Jonin restricted skills? Who is the boy who returns from, not one, but 2 missions gone awry? And all but unscathed. Kabuto completed his full circle and came to stand beside his master, the two of them sporting nearly identical grins of anticipation. Who is Uzumaki Naruto? He finished dramatically. Who indeed? Orochimaru hissed. A snake slithered from his wide sleeve and fell to the ground, where it slowly began its trek up Naruto's leg. The blonde's eyes widened as he felt the sensation from a distance, the numbness dulling the weight of the deadly reptile as it made its way across Naruto's torso and came to rest around his neck. Its tongue flickered out to tickle the boy's ear. Why don't we let the boy speak for himself? What do you say, Kabuto-kun? A good idea, Orochimaru-sama. Well then. The snake Sannin reached out and ever so gently drew the back of his fingers down Naruto's left cheek in a twisted mockery of a caress. Stinging pins and needles spread forth from the pale man's touch as the paralysis was lifted. Naruto gasped as he was suddenly able to move his mouth and breathe freely. Air that had only entered sparingly through his nose for the past minutes was taken in huge gulps, his eyelids blinked at a furious pace, causing the boy to tear up as the irritation of temporary paralysis was dispelled. Well, what do you want from me? The blonde demon container finally managed to wheeze. So to the point, the pale man muttered with a roll of his yellow eyes. Nothing that you won't be willing to give in time, Naruto-kun. Of that I can assure you. The more pressing question is, what do you want from me? Naruto's brows creased in a harsh glare. I don't want anything from you, he all but screamed. Do lower your voice. No one can hear you, and it is simply impolite, the Sannin chastised. And you will want something from me, dear boy, for you see, you have a problem, a rather large problem, in fact, in the form of a group of very powerful individuals after the fox sealed inside you. Akatsuki, Naruto bit out with vitriol. The blonde had the pleasure of seeing genuine surprise cross the infamous criminal's face. You've heard of them. It wasn't a question. A grin of amusement crossed the man's face once more, gleaming white teeth showing. You wouldn't be so kind as to tell me how you came by that name? At Naruto's stony silence the man chuckled. Cuckoo, I thought not, but it is irrelevant. How you came by their name means little, only that you do know their name. And how do you know their name? Naruto asked bitingly, almost despite himself. Why, we used to work together. Orochimaru declared like it was the most obvious thing in the world. I had the privilege of being a member of their illustrious organization once upon a time, though we parted on, shall we say, less than amicable terms. And here, we come to the root of the issue, the Sannin said. Naruto held his silence for 10 full seconds before the snake around his neck hissed its displeasure in his ear. And that is? That you, Naruto-kun, are in no way, shape, or form properly trained or equipped to deal with my old comrades. The pale man gave Naruto a pitying look. You need only look at your situation now for confirmation. You stand before me, helpless. Should I wish to kill you, Kagebunshin, or no, I could, let there be no doubt as to that. Now, picture yourself standing alone, against an organization of my near equals. The cold feeling of dread that was always lurking at the back of Naruto's consciousness was slowly taking hold. It was the same feeling he had gotten when watching Asuma and Zabuza go toe-to-toe at a level that was utterly beyond the scope of his comprehension. It was the feeling that told him that he was completely outclassed in every way imaginable, and that his life was in the hands of someone else. You are immensely talented, Naruto-kun. The potency of your chakra alone speaks of your enormous potential for ninjutsu. Your reserves are massive for one your age. But that talent alone will not suffice against the likes of the Akatsuki, Orochimaru lectured. You need training. Training to turn that enormous potential into a finely tuned weapon that can destroy your enemies. You mean your enemies? Naruto growled. The grin on the Snake Sanin's face only widened. Our common enemy, in this case. The blonde stared at the legendary ninja, comprehending what the man was suggesting through the haze of fear and trepidation that enveloped his mind. And you're suggesting I join you? Orochimaru only spread his arms in confirmation. You're a traitor. A criminal. Koku. Is that how I am portrayed in the history books? The man asked, amused at Naruto's outburst. You experimented on your comrades. On Konoha ninja and civilians. Naruto burst out, mind spewing out every scrap of damning information it could to declare why he would never join him. A foolish mistake. You're still a criminal, Naruto insisted. Orochimaru rolled his eyes. Your argument grows weak. Your yandere, he spat with a sneer, is this village's greatest hero, and yet a villain of the highest caliber in Iwagakure. To be more relevant, a criminal in Kanahagakure, myself, in this case, is a savior to hundreds in the country of rice fields, and their daimyo pays me tribute. The results of my illegal experiments have yielded medical advancements and care for an entire nation of people who your village would see die without a care in the world. But I will indulge you in this, Naruto-kun. Indeed, from Konoha's point of view I am a criminal who abandoned them. And in the midst of a war, no less, the pale man said. Damning, to be sure, but you must ask yourself this, what allegiance does a man whose talent, and genius, and innovation is ignored by the very village he had served faithfully, owe to a village that does not appreciate him? Tell me, Orochimaru ordered. Naruto was silent. None, was the simple answer from the Snake Sanin. For as much as the shinobi must sacrifice for his village, so too must the village recognize and reward the shinobi for his service, for his efforts to save the village from stagnation and decline. And when that does not happen, the sacred bond between shinobi and village is shattered, and the two must part. The blonde sputtered, searching for an argument, any argument that would shut the man in front of him up. Anything that would stop his words. Kabuto interjected before so much as a thought had truly crossed his mind. Naruto, he said patiently. Tying yourself to Konoha in these coming days is foolish at best and suicidal at worst. Their decline has happened, and the village is coming to an end. And with its fall, so come do the Akatsuki, seeking you as their prize. And they will have you, Orochimaru picked up. No matter what friends you have that will stand at your side, no matter if Konoha's remnants will stand alongside you in battle, you and they will all die. And your existence will come to a short and anonymous end. You will, doubtlessly, come to realize this yourself, Naruto-kun. You will realize that this village, for all of its reputation, can neither protect you nor give you the ability to strike down your enemies, nor, even, would they wish to, the Sannin said. You are their pawn, a weapon forged in the heat of desperation to be used and discarded. Konoha's to ignore for your service, and held up as a scapegoat in times of strife. And those times are coming. You need a teacher, Kabuto said reasonably. A small smile that was one part understanding and one part pity played across his lips. Someone who appreciates all of the immense talent you have and the knowledge and skill to bring it forth. Someone who can both shield you from the Akatsuki while giving you the skills to strike them down. And that's him? Naruto asked, breaking the boy's impassioned speech. His voice was heavy with trepidation, and no small amount of confusion at the deluge of information that was hitting him straight between the eyes. Kabuto merely shrugged, his smile still in place, as if to say who else? You need not accept now, Naruto-kun. The now familiar grin returned, and yellow eyes alit with the inner mirth that had been present early, but had disappeared as Orochimaru spoke. I am offering my services, you might say, for when the time comes, and Konoha can no longer protect you. When this village no longer has any meaning for you. And it will come, the Sannin stated with certainty. A time when the needs of your own survival will far outweigh the ties that bind you here. When that happens, come and find me. The blonde had no time or means to react as the snake that was coiled around his neck struck suddenly, and the searing bite of fangs was the last thing Naruto felt before he knew no more. // He watched the explosion of smoke with nothing but the smallest glimmer of satisfaction. And so the great game begins, he mused. Uzumaki Naruto's loyalty was a prize he was far from winning, but the risk was worth the result it would bring. The boy's potential was just that high. Beside him, Kabuto let loose a laugh. Your boldness knows no bounds, Orochimaru-sama. To reveal both of us like that, is he really worth it? The snake Sannin nearly rolled his eyes at his subordinate. For all the boy's shrewdness and skill, he had much to learn. Your mission is finished, and I gain nothing by keeping you in Konoha's good graces for a month longer. He had no need to speak of revealing himself. Sarutobi had known of his presence in his village for days now, thanks to Anko. You're right, of course, the silver-haired youth demurred. But the question remains. The smallest twinge of irritation broke through the snake Sannin's clinical musings. Despite your best efforts, Kabuto-kun, Kimimaro was dying, and I'm afraid that the Sound Four are simply not as effective as they were with him at their head. I'm in need of a new lieutenant, and Naruto-kun will be a perfect fit. Even without your Juin? Orochimaru sent the boy a withering look, and was distinctly unsatisfied with the smile Kabuto was sporting. Insolent whelp. The youth was pushing his buttons, probing the waters, and testing his patience. And nothing set him off quite like blatant stupidity. His fingers twitched, itching to form the seals that would summon his shadow snakes and end the annoyance standing next to him. But he refrained. Kabuto was far more useful alive than dead, regardless of the boy's proclivity towards provoking him. His medical skills alone qualified him. The calculating mind and deadly shinobi behind the harmless front he displayed was both a bonus and a great source of the Sannin's vexation. Even without the mark, Kabuto-kun. I trust one don't need to explain the nature of a Jinchuriki to you. It wasn't a question. And though the older man's tone was just as mild as it had been with the youth all night, the undercurrent of promised violence was enough to make Kabuto pause. But not to stop. But to tempt the Akatsuki so, it's an awful risk, Orochimaru-sama. The smile had returned to the boy's face, and it was as sly as a fox. It was the same smile that had been on his face when he had reported that Hanzo had fallen, and Pain and Akatsuki were now in control of an entire hidden village. 2 seals and a bite to the neck is all it would take, his subconscious whispered. The poison alone would be enough to override his healing. The Sannin crushed the murderous impulse quickly. The boy derived far too much amusement from seeing his master wage a silent war with his former comrades. And not for the first time did Orochimaru doubt his young subordinate's loyalty. The silver-haired medic had a treacherous streak a mile wide, and regardless of Sasori's loyalty seal being broken, the youth could very well still harbor some allegiance to his old master. He would hate to have to kill him, however. The boy's skills were invaluable, both as a medic and a spy, and their word games were entertaining enough from time to time, despite Kabuto's willingness and even eagerness to aggravate him. His face was perfectly neutral as he responded, a risk worth the reward, Kabuto-kun. Akatsuki has not the means to hold a Jinchuriki captive for long, and Naruto-kun, thanks to his Biju, must be taken last. With time and training, he will be the perfect weapon to serve as my right hand. Of course, Orochimaru-sama. If I may take my leave? The pale man waved him away with a hand. The ANBU are already on their way. I will contact you with any further instructions later. Yes, Orochimaru-sama. The silver-haired boy nodded once before disappearing in a cloud of smoke. The snake Sannin stood alone in the center of the training room. A productive evening indeed, he mused in satisfaction. Koku. What will you do, Naruto-kun? He asked the empty air. A single hand seal was formed and orange flames consumed the infamous criminal from the ground up before he had disappeared entirely. The ANBU platoon, led by the Hokage himself, found nothing upon their entrance 3 minutes later. A rush of light followed by a cool draft ruffled pristine white robes as Sarutobi emerged onto his balcony overlooking the preliminary exam room. 2 white-cloaked ANBU walked in lockstep to either side of him, while 2 more stayed behind the balcony curtains. His eyes were forward, and his face set in stone as he walked with purpose towards the center of the balcony, where his chair rested. "Hokage-sama," was the ritualistic call of his Chunin and Jonin from beneath the balcony as he looked them over one by one, granting each a nod in turn. Both Ibiki and Anko were present, as well as the other Chunin proctors from the first exam. The 2 ranking shinobi were keeping closer to themselves, however, and away from the other shinobi present. Though Sarutobi suspected it was due to Anko's barely restrained anger than anything else. Though it is difficult to blame her, the old man mused. The information revealed to her of Orochimaru's new attack hadn't been taken well, and coupled with their encounter only days prior in the forest had left the woman in a violent state of mind. And to question Naruto's loyalty as she always was better at making enemies than friends. The blonde genin, after having recited his clone's ordeal, hadn't taken kindly to Anko's insinuating that it was the second time he and Orochimaru had run into each other, demanding to know what she was implying. Only Sarutobi's presence in the room prevented the spat from turning physical. "Ah, the fire of youth," thought the Hokage sardonically as he lowered himself into his seat with a well-concealed sigh of satisfaction, echoing the sentiments of one of his more famous jonin. 2 ANBU fell to either side of him as he relaxed. The armchair was plush and as comfortable as any in the village, though a clever genjutsu layered the image of a solid stone throne over the top of it. He was far too old to be sitting in such a chair for any extended period of time, and would have balked at it even had he not been 69. There was no need to sacrifice comfort when the image of invulnerability and power could so easily be draped over it. Aging eyes peered out from under the Hokage's hat, looking over the various jonin instructors present, both foreign and domestic. The jonin were clustered on a separate ledge, where Yuhi Kurenai and Madogai made amiable conversation whilst Kakashi and Tenzo, Yamato, looked to be speaking in hushed tones a few meters away. A pang of regret shot through the old man as he was reminded of his son's absence. Asuma would have been among the Konoha contingent, no doubt eager to watch his 3 protégés prove their worth. "You were still so young, Asuma-kun." Such thoughts fled from his mind as 1-0. Sarutobi took the proffered scroll with a nod, scanning the names quickly as he took in the altered brackets he had ordered. "Everything appears to be in order," he told the still-standing ANBU in front of him. A flex and push of his chakra incinerated the scroll in his hands, the ashes falling like slow rain to the tiled balcony below. "Bring them in," he ordered. "Yes, Hokage-sama." The lieutenant disappeared in a shunshin as Sarutobi leaned back in his chair. Waiting idly for the genin to be brought forth, the old man scanned the crowd of jonin and chunin who populated the balcony below him. A few notable clan heads had petitioned for their viewing of the preliminary rounds, so as to see their children compete in the event they didn't make it to the true finals. Scattered about were a few nondescript chunin that Sarutobi knew belonged to the barrier corps. Having 2 Jinchuriki in one building was a nightmare to just about anyone, and having a few trained professionals on hand to limit any possible damage soothed the nerves. A light brush on his arm turned his head to the left to regard the ANBU guard who had touched him. The man was concealed behind a bird mask, and made a single seal of battlespeak. "Toad," he said, and the Sandaime concealed his chuckle even as the ANBU to his right stiffened slightly as she put the pieces together. "So you decided to come after all," Sarutobi muttered. "I had thought you might wait." "No sense in it," Jiraiya returned. "Not after last night." The Hokage nodded his head in acknowledgement and was silent. He would have to interrogate his student once the matches were completed, to find out how he had so easily gained access to his personal guard. Even now, after 40 years, the man managed to surprise him. The sound of double wooden doors opening on the ground floor attracted the attention of all present. Eyes swiveled to take in the forms of an even 20 genin striding into the room. 19 teams walked in separate lines to stand in front of the ram seal statue, the 20th team short one member. Yukoshi Kabuto, Sarutobi remembered with a twinge of bitterness at the spy's successful infiltration. There had been some discussion as to whether to disqualify the boy's remaining teammates and hold them for questioning, but in the end he had decided to let events play out. Whether they were a part of his old students' schemes would be told in time, and the coming fights would be as good an indicator as any as to the threat Akato Yoroi and Tsurugi Misumi might pose. 20 remaining genin, the old man heard his right ANBU guard whisper. Impressive. Down below, Anko scowled. A small smile crossed Sarutobi's lips at the sight of the 3 full rookie Konoha teams. Their sensei were right to nominate them. His brown eyes fell on the boy who had been occupying his thoughts lately. Naruto stood in between his 2 teammates, his expression hard. Blue eyes flittered over the assembled shinobi and kunoichi on the balcony above him, before finally coming to rest on the Sandame's own. The blond boy gave a nod of acknowledgement and deference, which Sarutobi responded to with a slight raising of his head. Their debrief the previous night had been short, as the Hokage had matters to attend to, but no less stressful than any of their previous meetings. Orochimaru's offer hadn't been a surprise, truly, but it was worrying all the same. Perhaps you were right after all, Jiraiya. He smothered his conflicting emotions with practiced ease and rose. The second phase of the Chunin selection exams is now complete. Congratulations to all of you who remain, he began, his voice modulated to carry throughout the entire room. Before we begin the third phase, there is something that you all, as potential Chunin, should be aware of. And that is the true nature of this exam. An uneasy rustling of cloth greeted his words, and Sarutobi was satisfied that he had their attention. Why is it that many nations come together for this test? He addressed the genin whilst stepping forward. His hands were clasped behind his back and his face carefully stoic as he continued, to promote friendship among the nations, to raise the level of shinobi. Both completely untrue. As potential future Chunin of your villages, I do not want for you all to be confused as to the true meaning. This exam is a substitute for war. Unsettled muttering broke out at the proclamation, though Sarutobi clearly saw a few of the genin silently piecing together the puzzle before them. In the past, these same nations gathered here warred. We fought for power, for land, and above all else for prestige and reputation. This exam is a substitute for the wars that consumed the continent for decades. The old man's hands came forward in a sweeping gesture. Today it is you who fight for your village in battle. But why? Inazuka Kiba burst out. He ignored Naruto's shove to shut up. Why do we have to risk our lives? Because a shinobi's true worth is only seen in life and death situations. The answer was quick, for Sarutobi had expected the question. They truly should be made aware of the facts before they enter, the old man thought, and not for the first time. If the strength of the villages is to be seen, it can only be through true combat, for only then can the skills of shinobi be properly assessed. A Konoha girl with twin hair buns spoke next. But then, what about the friendship between the villages? Sarutobi almost smiled in spite of himself. Through life and death there is balance. Through this exam that balance among the villages is achieved. That is the nature of the friendship between villages. It is a harsh world we live in, children, and I do hate to be the one to reveal it. Before we begin the third phase, for those who have not yet grasped my words, I will tell you this. This exam is not merely a test, but a life-risking battle for your village. Your country's and your village's reputation rests on your shoulders. The Sandame trailed off, letting his statement hang heavy in the air as the genin digested their own importance. A single voice shattered the silence. I don't care what it means, Sabaka Nogara spoke flatly, his beady eyes trained on the Hokage. Just get on with it and tell us what this life and death situation is. As one, the heads of every single Konoha genin swiveled to glare at the offending boy who dared to speak so disrespectfully to their Kage. The redhead shrugged them off with complete indifference, electing to keep his bored gaze fixed on the Hokage. On the balcony above, a Suna Jonin with cloth covering half of his face pinched the bridge of his nose and shook his head. Sarutobi was unruffled. Of course, he said dryly, his own eyes locked with the disrespectful Jinchuriki's. He regarded the boy with complete indifference, which seemed to put the redhead on edge. Impudent boy. If only Masa had instilled some discipline in you. The Sandaime opened his mouth to continue, but was halted as a figure dropped from above in front of him. A pale man, clad in standard Konoha fare and his hitayate worn as a bandana, fell to a knee in front of him. The katana on his back clattered lightly as he raised his head. If I may, Hokage-sama, as the proctor of the third exam. His voice trailed off in a cough. By all means. Sarutobi gave the eager special jonin a smile as he rose and vaulted the railing. Bags were heavy under the man's eyes, and the Sandaime couldn't help but sigh in regret at the sight of a man whose once promising career was being reduced to almost nothing due to an unfortunate injury. To his right, his ANBU guard shifted, and the old man spared her a glance of sympathy. Hello, my name is Geka Hey-8, and I'm the proctor for the third exam, the man greeted the genin formally. A chorus of coughs followed his statement, and it was a full 10 seconds before he regained composure enough to continue. But before the third test, we're going to have a preliminary round, to narrow the field of applicants. Hey-8 would have continued, if not for an indignant cry from the back of the genin. A preliminary round? Nara Shikamaru burst out. What do you mean preliminary? The rookies, who all knew Shikamaru, turned their heads and stared at the pineapple-haired youth in shock. The boy wasn't one to readily speak his mind in most situations, especially not in the face of authority. Sarutobi only allowed himself the slightest of smiles at the interruption, though Jiraiya looked to be holding back a full-blown belly laugh to his left. So very like his father, he mused. There are too many applicants for the third exam to proceed properly. A round of coughs followed, and the genin waited impatiently for the man to continue. Whether due to easy first and second exams, or due to the field being exceptional, there are too many of you left for the fights to be held in public. Due to Chunin's selection exam rules, we must have a preliminary round to reduce the number of participants. Silence greeted Hai-8's words, the genin digesting the fact that they would be forced to endure yet another round before making it to the finals. They would have to prevail here to have a hope of being promoted. This round begins now, so any genin who feel that they might not be up to it, please raise your hands and you will be disqualified, the examiner said. The nervous muttering was renewed with vigor, but no hands were raised. Sarutobi, from his vantage point, gave a small, unseen nod of satisfaction. Well, no takers then, Hey-8 quipped. If, then, you'll all pay attention to the board. The sickly man raised a hand and pointed to a screen above the ram seal statue, where names began to flash randomly in green letters. It settled on 2 just as Sarutobi retook his seat. He ignored the weight of Jiraiya's questioning gaze as he regarded the soon-to-be battleground stoically. The first match will be Kenyuta Dosu versus Uzumaki Naruto, Hey-8 announced. Sarutobi watched with appraising eyes as the 2 genin immediately gave the other a once-over as their counterparts slowly dispersed and walked up the steps to their balcony. Yamanaka Ino remained, however, having caught Naruto by his arm before he could move to the center of the arena. She whispered something in his ear that the blonde boy nodded at, before hurrying up the stairs herself. I was hoping I would fight you in the real finals, after Sasuke-kun of course, Dosa said, his voice calm and even contrite. I feel I should repay you for that trick you pulled on me in the first exam room. I feel like I might be being taken a bit too lightly. Naruto didn't respond as he checked the bandages wrapping his ankles. Deeming them good enough, he patted his weapons pouches and kunai holsters down, before drawing his twin knuckle knives and squaring himself up. Despite the pang of loss that resonated through his chest at the sight of his dead son's weapons, the Sandaime couldn't help but smile at the sight the boy before him. Nothing to say to me, the heavily bandaged boy asked. His face, covered as it was, wasn't visible, but the single eye narrowed in irritation. What's to say? Naruto asked. His voice was bland, his expression indifferent, but his eyes blazed with an emotion Sarutobi couldn't place at first glance. The bandaged boy was silent for a moment, before he turned the examiner. Proctor-san, I assume that killing is still permitted? The arena, which had been filled with a hum of anticipation from not just the genin but the assembled ranking shinobi as well, fell completely silent. The Sandame felt he might have been able to hear a pin drop. It is, yes, Hayate confirmed. But the match will end if and when I deem it. That's all I needed to know, Proctor-san, Dosu interrupted. Hayate let the silence hang for a few seconds as the two boys surveyed each other at 5 meters apart. Well, if there's nothing else, begin. The examiner's arm dropped to signal the start of the fight, and Naruto didn't waste a second before the sound in the arena was deafening. Wind chakra burst from the knuckle knives into visible, 20-foot whips of pure destructive power as the blonde's lips peeled back in a snarl. The genin brought the whips up and crashing down in the shape of an X. Wind howled its fury as tile was torn asunder and dirt was thrown skyward as Dosa dove to his right to avoid being cleaved into pieces. He rolled to stop his momentum, and was immediately set upon by Naruto. The bandaged boy took an elbow to the solar plexus that sent him hurtling backwards, but he righted himself quickly. The Oto genin landed softly a few meters from the blonde, who broke into a sprint. His eye widening, Dosa palmed and hurled a kunai at the oncoming Naruto, hoping to slow him down. The Jinchuriki acted quickly, bringing his left knife to bear. The whip shortened to a blade that bisected the kunai and hurled the halves away harmlessly as Naruto didn't bother to break stride. The blonde entered the Oto genin's space like a hurricane, swinging his right blade down just as Dosa brought his melody arm up in a desperate block. The weapon, designed to amplify sound waves with chakra, didn't even have a chance to be activated as Naruto cleaved it in two with a downward slash that took the bandaged boy's right hand off at the forearm. Dosa had no time to process the loss of his right hand, he had no time to scream in pain, he had no time to blink. Naruto stepped, planted his right foot inside his guard and stopped his momentum dead by pulling his body into a tight spin with his left arm outstretched. Wind screamed its fury for all to hear as Naruto's left blade sliced through the Oto genin's neck like a hot knife through butter, and the blonde came to rest with his arms outstretched in opposite directions. Its eyes still open wide in shock, the severed head of King Yuta Dosa dropped to the arena floor with a sickeningly wet thump. The rest of the body joined it a moment later, falling forward in a spray of arterial blood that peppered Naruto's face and torso with bright red drops. The Konoha genin dropped his gaze to the two parts of the genin he had just killed, his blue eyes widening ever so slightly at the sight. There was an element of surprise hidden in their depths, as if the boy was stunned that he had actually killed his opponent. They remained there for a full 5 seconds of absolute silence that held the arena and its spectators in a vice grip. Finally, he blinked and shook his head as if to clear it of cobwebs, and stepped away from the two parts of what had once been a genin of Otogakure. Winner, Uzumaki Naruto, Hayate declared pointlessly. It was all the invitation the crowd needed for the dam to break, and hushed murmurings filled the air. The ranking shinobi turned amongst themselves, conversations breaking out immediately. The genin opposite them, however, were as silent as death. "TCH, the gaki's not bad," Jiraiya muttered to Sarutobi's left. "Are you satisfied?" the Sandame asked. "Not by half, old man, but I'll see what I can do with him." The voice was carefully neutral, but Sarutobi couldn't help but detect the undercurrent of excitement at the prospect of teaching the boy. The Sandame's eyes were fixed on Naruto, however, who simply wiped his knives down with a cloth in a practiced ritual he had no doubt learned from Asuma. The blonde sheathed them at his hips with a spin around his fingers and a flourish, before turning slightly to face the gathered, ranking shinobi. Blue eyes locked with aging brown and Naruto lowered his head in deference to the Sandame before turning abruptly, and making his way up the stairs to his teammates. Amid the excited murmurings of his shinobi and kunoichi, the silence of the assembled genin, and the sound of footsteps announcing the arrival of the cleanup crew, Sarutobi smiled. // For what was the first time in the 2 months since Yamato had become his sensei, Naruto was legitimately annoyed with the man. It was bound to happen at some point, but it could have been at a much better time, in the blonde genin's esteemed opinion. Some small, distant, and far more rational part of his brain reasoned that with both Kiba and Ino in the finals right along with him, their sensei should certainly be paying attention to them as well. But this is some goddamn bullshit, he thought with vitriol. Being handed a compilation of chakra control exercises and being told to work on them wasn't his idea of training. Especially not with a murderous Suna genin as his future opponent. Sabaka no Gaara was easily the most ridiculous genin Naruto had ever met. He had heard of the boy's instability from Sasuke, who had apparently had a run-in with him before the exams had even started, and had seen it firsthand in the boy's fight against Lee in the preliminaries. Only Guy had been able to stop the insane genin from killing Lee even after the fight had been called. Chakra control exercise wouldn't help him against a monster that had been able to recover from Lee's opening of 5 celestial gates. Nothing save Asuma's trench knives would even put a dent in the boy's sand armor, and there was little guarantee that he could even get close enough to use them properly. He was quick, but Lee had always been a few cuts above him in terms of speed, and that kind of movement and agility couldn't be gained in a month. And that means taijutsu is gonna be useless too, the blonde mused unhappily from his position under a waterfall. The white noise did nothing to comfort his nerves as he reflected on his situation. Ninjutsu was Naruto's only answer to Gaara's inhuman defense, and nothing the blonde knew was good enough by half. The futon, Rankuden, was the most offensively powerful jutsu he knew, and just from seeing Gaara absorb Lee's Goken, Naruto knew that it wouldn't be nearly enough. I could make it sharper. Harder, faster, stronger, but it still won't be enough. That sounds too tough and too quick on its own. The blonde flinched as he felt a light mist start to brush against his nose, and gritted his teeth in frustration. His anger didn't help his plight, however, and drops of water on his forehead heralded an explosion of chakra that sent half the water in the small lake hurtling outwards in a wave. At its center stood Naruto, the cascading waterfall behind him ending in a mist that swirled around the genin violently as he seethed. A single, heavy sigh escaped his lips as his hands fell limply to his sides. "God damn it," Naruto hissed, his eyes fluttering closed so as to not take in the sight of his anger. His temper had been one of his most defining characteristics as a child, followed by his impatience, and, despite his strides toward level-headedness and self-control, it could easily get the best of him from time to time. The blonde shook his head in an attempt to compose himself. Maybe I should take a break, he thought. Some lunch and a breather might do wonders for his focus, and it wasn't as if he could get any real training done in his current frame of mind. Resolved, Naruto's hands formed a familiar cross-shaped seal, and 4 clones popped into existence. "Corners, work your way in," the original commanded tiredly, gesturing to the edges of the training ground. His explosive temper had created quite a mess, and he had no want for an official reprimand for leaving a training ground in complete disarray. Sparing the doppelgangers a glance to make sure they weren't about to slack off, he sometimes found that his clones had a mind of their own when handling more mundane tasks. The original stepped into Shunshin. He reappeared at the edge of the path that led to his preferred training ground of the day, the speed jutsu sen coinciding flawlessly with his first step towards the village proper. Normally the execution of such a cool maneuver would bring a smirk to Naruto's face, but the blonde was in no mood for self-indulgence. His steps carried him through the throng of lunchtime walkers untouched as he reached the downtown. A vendor at the edge of the path locked eyes with the blonde for an instant, and Naruto felt the weight of disdain and outright hatred settle onto his shoulders. Blinking, blue eyes stared forward resolutely, passing over the bodies and faces of the midday crowd without truly taking them in. He knew what would greet him if he bothered to focus on the dozens of faces passing him by. Ever since Asuma's funeral, it seemed as if the general populace had reverted to their old views of him from before he had stopped his almost daily pranks. Where indifference and even a smattering of respect had met him for the past 4 years, hostility and glares greeted him nowadays. He was shunned, just as he had once been, for the unforgivable crime of surviving where one of Konoha's great jonin had fallen. "Fuck you all," he breathed, his voice barely audible even to himself. "You are their pawn, a weapon forged in the heat of desperation to be used and discarded. Konoha's to ignore for your service, and held up as a scapegoat in times of strife. I am offering my services, you might say, for when the time comes, and Konoha can no longer protect you. When this village no longer has any meaning for you." The Snake Sanin's words came to him unbidden, and Naruto very nearly flinched as they struck home. "Get out of my head," he silently commanded, but the message had been struck home days before and, try as he might, it wouldn't leave him alone. It had been easy to ignore back in the tower, surrounded by fellow competitors and knowing that the Sandaime was never more than a hallway or two away. He had let the competition dominate his every thought, and Orochimaru's promises had been relegated to the back burner of his mind. Now, however, surrounded by glares and hostility on all sides, the whispers rang loud and clear. The blonde felt the grinding of his teeth ought to have been audible to every person he passed as he strode through the downtown. His eyes were narrowed, his face set in stone, and his temper palpable as he flung back the curtains that served as the entrance to Ichiraku Ramen. It was crowded, as the genin had known it would be, but he found that he couldn't care less as his nostrils were assaulted by the sweet aroma of fresh noodles and broth. Naruto elbowed and shoved his way to the front of the counter, claiming his seat just as a woman vacated it. "You kiddin' me, brat?" a man practically yelled incredulously. "I've been waiting for that spot for 5 minutes now. Get your ass up." The blonde, who likely would have acquiesced on a better day, was in no mood for some civilian's rhetoric. A glare that would have set trained shinobi on edge from its sheer vitriol met the man's incredulity head-on, and the civilian staggered back a step. Realizing who he was dealing with, and recognizing the poison in the boy's expression, the man cut his losses hastily and moved to another section of the counter to wait for a spot to open up. Sneering in disgust, Naruto turned his eyes to Ayam, who was working the counter, only to be met with cool indifference and a slight nod. Kanji were scribbled onto an order slip without a word, and less than 30 seconds later, a steaming bowl of miso ramen was in front of the genin and being devoured with relish. It was gone in under 2 minutes, only to be replaced almost immediately. Despite his mood, Naruto nearly smiled. After years of dealing with him and his temper, the Ikirakus had developed a simple system. Miso ramen was always the answer to a moody Naruto, and they would keep pumping it out until the blonde was ready to calm down or talk. "Something got your panties in a twist, kiddo?" a deep voice asked from right next to him. Idiot civilians who need to mind their own goddamn business, Naruto thought. He bit back the retort on the tip of his tongue, knowing that it would get him nowhere. "Lots of somethings," he muttered, though he was sure the man heard him. The list of somethings began with Sabaka no Gara, and didn't get much better as it went on. "TCH, the man scoffed, drawing Naruto's ire. "You think you've got issues? Gaki, you don't even know what real issues are." Only respect for the value of the Ichiraku's property kept Naruto from slamming his fists onto the countertop. "Who the fuck do you think you are, old man?" the blonde demanded, whirling to face the interloper. Blue eyes blazed as Naruto contemplated the best ways to properly eviscerate the man, only to widen comically as they beheld the source of their rage. The man was huge, for there was no other word to describe his size, and dressed in one of the most ridiculous outfits that Chunin Hopeful had ever seen. A green, short-skirt kimono and matching pants were covered by an almost knee-length red vest, mesh armor and handguards covered the rest of his upper body, and traditional geta covered his feet. Blood-red lines ran from under his eyes to the edge of his face, standing out starkly against the pure white hair that reached the middle of the man's back. It was the hair that gave him away, and Naruto sputtered in shock for a moment as recognition flared within him. In the distant recesses of his mind, he marveled at having now met two of the legendary Sannin in the span of a few days. "I've got a lot of names, Gaki," the man drawled with a smile that oozed smug satisfaction. "But you probably know me as Jiraiya." All of the pent-up anger and frustration that had almost been released upon the man evaporated in the blink of an eye as Naruto stumbled over himself. Later, he would curse himself for his lack of composure in front of a living legend. I am sorry, Jiraiya-sama. My name is Yuzu Dash." "No need to introduce yourself, kid. I know who you are," the Sannin said wryly. At Naruto's grimace he clapped him on the forearm. "Get that a lot? Let me tell you something, Gaki, being well-known ain't a bad thing. It's as much a weapon as those knives you got at your waist, you just gotta know how to use it." Naruto blinked at the odd advice as Jiraiya signaled Ayam for his check. The huge man's eyes swiveled to the girl as she approached, raking over her form so quickly that Naruto thought he may have imagined it. "It's on the house, Jiraiya-sama." "I insist," Ayam said with a smile. "It's an honor to serve you." The man chuckled deeply, his eyes never leaving Ayam's. "Ah, but that leaves me with a problem. My waitress, a beautiful young woman, served me so well that I had wanted to leave her a generous tip. Surely you wouldn't deny such a lovely lady her reward? I blushed at the compliments to her, and the Sanin's smile widened. Of course you wouldn't, he concluded, taking the girl's right hand in his own. He laid a fleeting kiss on her overturned knuckles before turning it over and withdrawing, somehow leaving a small pile of coins in her outstretched hand. With one last grin at the stunned serving girl, Jiraiya rose languidly, picking up a large scroll that had rested next to his stool and swinging it over his shoulders onto his back. Naruto stared after him in wonderment and confusion as he moved towards the flaps that served as Ichiraku's entrance. One hand parted the cloth, revealing the outside world, and he turned back with an eyebrow raised. "You coming, Gaki?" he asked Naruto, jerking his head in the direction of the rest of the village. The blonde, still motionless, processed the question in an instant before his eyes widened. Through the haze of confusion, he managed to spare enough thought to drop a few ryo on the countertop to cover his meal before he practically leapt from his stool and rushed to the exit. Jiraiya, waiting with a wry smile and his eyebrows still raised, gestured for Naruto pass through before following without a word. The blonde obliged him and exited to the busy, mid-afternoon streets. Blinking to get his bearings, Naruto turned to find Jiraiya, only to be greeted with the sight of the man's back making its way through the crowd of civilians doing their business. The blonde scowled at the blatant disrespect, feeling his anger and frustration return, but mastered himself in a moment as he quickly followed the large man. Despite having legs far longer than Naruto's, Jiraiya wasn't moving hurriedly. The genin caught up in a matter of seconds, pulling level with a question flying off his tongue. "Jiraiya-sama, I dash." "Hang on a second, kiddo, gotta take care of a bit of business," the Sannin said without even sparing Naruto a glance. "Hold this for me, will ya?" The blonde rushed to snatch the behemoth of a scroll before it could fall to the ground, grunting as the unexpected weight settled in his hands. His companion had disappeared into a nearby stall, Naruto noted with growing consternation. "The hell am I supposed to do with this?" he mumbled. "The guy takes me away from lunch to hold his scroll?" He would have wondered why he was even there, but the answer was simple. When one of Konoha's Sannin beckoned, you went. Whatever the famous ninja wanted from him would be sorted out in due time, preferably sooner rather than later in Naruto's mind. Doing his best to keep his mind off the building annoyance towards the legend, the blonde busied himself with inspecting the scroll he had been burdened with. What in the heavens could he be storing in here? Naruto wondered aloud. "It's huge." "Things above your pay grade, Gaki," Jiraiya rumbled from just behind him. Naruto, to his shame, actually started at the sudden appearance of the man. How the hell did he sneak up on me? The scroll was unceremoniously taken from his hands and slung across Jiraiya's back before Naruto had any chance to voice his question, and the man was on his merry way again, munching on a juicy-looking fruit. Only the years of patiently ignoring the villagers' glares and whispered insults kept Naruto from visibly reacting to the Sannin's dismissive behavior. "He made me hold that thing so he could buy some fruit?" Taking a breath to steady himself, he hated dismissal, he moved after the man. Waiting patiently for any sign of conversation to be started, and subsequently being disappointed, the man was perfectly happy to keep his silence. Apparently, Naruto opened his mouth once more. "Jiraiya-sama, you haven't dash." "Gimme a second, kid, just gotta pop in here real fast," Jiraiya cut across him. Naruto was quicker in reacting to the large scroll being tossed at him the second time around, and caught it with more inches to spare. "You gotta be kidding me." Naruto grumbled uncharitably as the Sannin made his way into a stall with a banner that read "Sake." "I should just go home," he thought. But then, it wasn't an option. By singling him out, the legendary ninja had shown an interest, of what kind, it remained to be seen, in him. Despite the almost unbelievable rudeness, Naruto's interest had been piqued, and he was forced to play along until that curiosity had been satisfied. "Fucker knows it too," the blonde mused with a scowl, remembering the smugness that had emanated from the man upon being recognized. "Asshole." "Ah, that's good stuff," Jiraiya sighed as he exited the booth. A bottle of newly purchased sake rested in his hand. "You want some?" he asked Naruto, snatching his scroll away. Naruto said eloquently, thrown by the unexpected question. He had never had alcohol before. I prefer tea, thanks, he managed to force out. The Sannin scoffed as he started to walk again, Naruto in his wake. TCH, you sound like the old man. Always sipping on his tea and smoking his pipe. Fine by me. To each their own, and all the more for me, I say. Unsure of what to say, and unsure of whether or not the man was even paying attention to him anymore, Naruto kept his silence. Inwardly, he wondered at what the man could possibly want with him. Despite evidence to the contrary, Jiraiya had to want something from him beyond just carrying around his scroll as he ran his errands. The question was what it was, and the answer was something Naruto was dying to figure out. In the wake of Yamato's training, or, rather, the lack thereof, Naruto couldn't help but let his mind drift to the possibility that Jiraiya was looking to take him on as a student. The idea was almost too good to be true, and Naruto was doing his best to think about other things. There was no use in setting himself up for disappointment. And if today was any indication, maybe being the man's student was more trouble than it was worth. The silence hung over the duo as they passed out of the village proper, following a wide stone pathway that Naruto knew led to the large hot springs that were at the edge of the village. Wondering at their probable destination, the blonde opted to try his luck with talking again. Listen, Jiraiya-sama, I'm not sure what it is you dash. He was cut off a third time, not by Jiraiya's words, but by the man's foot hurtling towards his face with enough speed to cave his skull in. Naruto stepped back hastily to avoid the kick that had come without warning, and leapt into the air. Pulling his body into a tight roll, he controlled his momentum and snatched his knuckle knives up from his waist out of reflex. Landing lightly, he lowered himself into a crouch and raised his arms to eye level. The genin blinked in confusion when all he saw was Jiraiya standing with his foot still outstretched, a contemplative look on his face. The foot was lowered to the ground slowly as the man took in the sight of the battle-ready genin. What the hell was that for? Naruto burst out. He still held his knives at the ready, wanting to be prepared for any more surprise attacks the insane man might throw at him. Jiraiya was silent for a beat, his eyes appraising, before he, for the first time since the ramen stand, turned his full attention to Naruto. You made space, never a bad thing, but I coulda killed you 5 times while you were in the air, Gaki. Going airborne should be a last resort to avoid attacks, not your first instinct. Stupefied at the sudden outpouring of useful advice, Naruto remained motionless. He shook himself to regain his bearings, digesting the information all the while, and lowered himself out of his defensive stance. He didn't put his knives away though, and missed the glint of satisfaction in Jiraiya's eyes at the gesture. So, you'd suggest a shuffle step? Or a glide? Naruto asked tentatively. I'd suggest a counterattack, the Sannin returned without missing a beat. But to anticipate that your situational awareness and anticipation would have to be a lot better than the crap they are now. Jiraiya gave a quick sigh and scratched the back of his head. Well, come on then, kid, we've got some work to do. Naruto, who had bristled at the casual slight against his skills, felt his eyes widen to almost comical size. He was at Jiraiya's side in an instant. Thank you, Jiraiya-sama, he said with a bow, his voice quiet in near reverence. He's actually gonna teach me. The Sannin waved him off with a barked laugh. It's sensei to you, kid. I appreciate the flattery, but I prefer it from women only. He tossed Naruto a wink that left no doubt as to what he meant, and let loose a hearty chuckle when the blonde flushed scarlet. Ha! So innocent. Let's go, Gaki, I don't have all day to stand around. And with that, the white-haired man moved off once more in the direction of the hot springs, Naruto in his wake. The blonde had a nearly giddy spring in his step as they moved closer to the hot springs, imagination running wild as he thought of everything Jiraiya could teach him. The man was an S-rank shinobi, one of the most feared men on the continent, and had taught the Yondaime, his father. Not even his disillusionment with his former hero could take away from the man's skills in Naruto's eyes. Namake's Minato had been unquestionably powerful, and if Jiraiya had been even a minuscule reason for that power, Naruto was in good hands. So great were his imaginings that Naruto didn't truly notice his surroundings, something he would later berate himself for, as Jiraiya had just criticized his situational awareness, until he and his new sensei were ready to enter the baths. The women's baths. The genin started, taking stock of his surroundings and clearly noting that the sign above the entrance to the baths said women, and not men. Is this a test or something? He wondered. Jiraiya-sensei, I think we went the wrong way. These are the women's baths. That they are, Gaki. Now let's go, I've got research to do. And with that, the Sannin casually stepped into the female side of the hot springs without any form of concealment. No genjutsu, no henge, no nothing. Naruto was left speechless and motionless at the entrance as he watched the large man slip into the water that was already occupied by multiple women, seemingly without a care in the world. And it was apparently warranted, for the women around him paid him no mind at all. There was no shock, no outpouring of righteous female fury at the sight of what was clearly a man sitting among them. A man who was currently raking his eyes over every woman in the water with him with a sort of boyish glee that reminded Naruto of his excitement after executing a perfect prank. After thoroughly appraising his company, Jiraiya turned his expectant eyes on Naruto, gesturing with his head as if to say, "What are you waiting for?" The blonde, the beginnings of what had to be the largest flush of his life marring his face, glanced about furtively, making sure no eyes were on him. He took a deep breath to steady himself, get it. Together, Uzumaki. And stepped cautiously into the baths. No screams of rage greeted him. His second step was much the same and, not willing to push his luck, he scampered over to where Jiraiya was lounging and lowered himself into the water. His eyes never left the stone flooring the whole time, unwilling as he was to risk catching a glimpse of the numerous naked women who had no idea there were two men in their midst. Ah, women, Jiraiya sighed. One of life's greatest pleasures right here, kiddo. Savor them and treasure them, they're fickle and far better than we are. Yes, sensei, Naruto acknowledged, his eyes shifting anywhere and everywhere there wasn't another person. The sight of two brunettes playfully splashing water at each other snagged his gaze for a moment before he averted his eyes, his face flaming. The byplay wasn't unnoticed by Jiraiya, who clapped him on the back with a chuckle. Relax, runt, and enjoy the view. They can't see us. And you'll have to figure out how on your own, he said quickly as Naruto opened his mouth with a question on the tip of his tongue. The blonde closed it with a snap and ran his left hand through his hair, partly out of frustration and partly to settle himself. Ino's light flirtations had nothing on his discomfort now. Blinking suddenly, the blonde stared at his left forearm. The slightest discoloration stood out against the sweaty skin, only visible due to the increasingly red tint to Naruto's skin. Is that Fuinjutsu? He breathed. His mind flashed to his encounter with his new sensei at Ichiraku's, where he had clapped him on the arm. Blue eyes snapped to the cheeky, smiling visage of the man in question and received a small nod. How did you? A lesson for another day, Gaki. You're not advanced enough for that yet, and we've got other things to cover. The suddenly serious expression on the man's face forestalled any protest Naruto had, and the boy nodded. Good. Now, tell me, kid, what's the cup size of the strawberry blonde? Naruto choked on his own saliva as he started at the unexpected, and ridiculous, question. I am sorry, what? You heard me, runt. Strawberry blonde, what's her cup size? The Sannin's face was set in stone, a single eyebrow raised. He's actually serious. Naruto trailed off. He forced his eyes to scan the women in the bath. It took him a couple of seconds to locate the lone strawberry blonde in the room, who lounged with a group of 4. She stretched languidly for a moment, and Naruto averted his eyes in embarrassment. Speak up, he ventured, calling upon the very limited knowledge of women's cup sizes Kiba had seen fit to bestow upon him. 32B to be exact, the Sannin corrected, his own eyes never leaving Naruto. Not a bad guess, but it took you a year and a half to get it. I had to find her first, sensei, Naruto quickly justified, and just as quickly berated himself as he saw exactly where Jiraiya was headed with this exercise. And there's your problem, Gaki, the man admonished. You never took stock of your surroundings. Were you embarrassed? Sure, but that's no excuse. We're shinobi, kid, and that means that we've gotta know what's going around us all the time. No. Matter. What? I understand, Sensei, Naruto acknowledged. He lifted his eyes from the water he sat in, willing himself to scan the numerous women scattered about. There were 9, 3 brunettes, 4 blondes, a single redhead, and the strawberry blonde. The fire in his cheeks was steadily ignored. Good. We can rectify your lack of cup-size knowledge later, Jiraiya chuckled. Next question, how many kunoichi are in here? Naruto's brow furrowed. How am I supposed to know that? Blue eyes flickered over the 9 women, looking for any tip-offs. All 9 were perfectly at ease, with very little difference in their bearings. They all smiled. They all splashed. They all stretched. Underneath, Naruto. 2, he said finally. At Jiraiya's encouraging nod he elaborated. Their muscle tone is sharper, more defined. Good. Which ones are they? Third brunette on the left and the redhead, Sensei, the blonde answered with confidence. And what's the redhead's specialty? Naruto paused, unsure. His eyes flickered over to the woman in question once more, searching for any clues. Nothing in her build, for it was slight and athletic, tipped him off. Her shoulders and eyes were just as at ease as every other woman in the bath, including her brunette counterpart across the water. I don't know. That's 'cause you don't know what to look for. Her wrists are thicker than everyone else's in here, and do you see the light markings around her chest? The Sannin asked, gesturing to the woman's breasts. Naruto nodded, doing his best to halt the massive blush that overtook him as the redhead shifted. Signs of taping. Now, a lot of kunoichi tape their breasts down so they don't inhibit movement, even with sports bras, but that plus her strong wrists means dash. Close combat, Naruto finished with a nod. Jiraiya gave him a grin. Most likely. Knowing a ninja's specialty gives you an idea of how best to fight them, how to use certain things to your advantage and how close you might want to get. It might be the difference between cooking someone with a fireball and getting your neck broken, the Sannin lectured. Now, when you can determine all of that with a glance, you might be worth something as a shinobi. Naruto only nodded his acceptance, mind reeling at the unorthodox lesson. How often had he charged headlong into fights without stopping to appraise his enemy first? Way too many times, he acknowledged. Often, the element of surprise had carried him through, but it wouldn't always. Not everyone would be so easily overwhelmed by his futon techniques. His mind flashed to the Wave Country mission, when he had gotten himself trapped in a brawl with a man twice his size and strength in close quarters. He hadn't been able to maneuver himself into a dominant position, and had only escaped relatively unscathed thanks to Ino's timely intervention. I think I understand, Sensei, Naruto said, locking eyes with the Sannin. And he did. He had to be able to adapt to his opponents to a certain extent, and knowing more about them was the key. Good. Not bad for a first day, Gaki, Jiraiya said, reaching down to ruffle Naruto's hair. The blonde swatted at him half-heartedly, drawing a chuckle. Keep what we talked about in mind wherever you go. It'll become natural eventually. Yes, Sensei. Now get out of here, I've got research to do and you're cramping my style. The Sannin shooed him away with his hand, a lecherous glint in his eye as he scanned the crowd of women in the baths. Naruto acquiesced with a roll of his eyes. Pervert, he muttered under his breath. That's super pervert to you, kiddo, and don't ever let me catch you selling me short, Jiraiya said sternly. The genin blinked at the completely serious face and nodded hesitantly. Super pervert it is. He turned to make his way out of the baths, only for the voice of his new, very unusual sensei to stop him in his tracks. Hey, Gaki. The old man said you were working on chakra control, right? Distantly, Naruto realized that the old man was the Hokage. It was nice to know someone besides him called Sarutobi that. Yeah, he answered. Take this. A sphere suddenly was hurtling towards his face. Naruto caught it with trepidation that only increased when he realized it was filled with water. A water balloon? Where the hell did he hide this thing? He wondered. Yeah, kid. Try popping it with just your chakra and nothing else. It'll do wonders for your control, the Sannin told him. The man pulled another balloon from nowhere and held it in his open palm. Without prompting, the latex began to ripple in every direction imaginable before suddenly exploding outwards in a shower of water. Naruto felt his eyes widening at the sight. And you might want to buy a few more of those. Jiraiya gestured to the balloon with a wry grin. It ain't easy. Yes, sensei, Naruto demurred, eyes on the balloon and mind full of the image that had just played out before him. Taking the man's lack of attention as dismissal, the blonde turned and strode out of the baths unnoticed by the female populace. Staring down at the water balloon in his hand, he mused that maybe things weren't quite so bad after all. The only way is a sphere, Naruto mused aloud. Jiraiya's final demonstration from their first day together had played out in the boy's mind almost non-stop since, only interrupted by eating, sleeping, and sessions with the man himself. Much to his chagrin, no matter how many times he had tried, the balloon had failed to burst. The Sannin hadn't been joking when he'd told him to stock up on balloons. He'd managed to pop it a few times, though never in the manner that Jiraiya had demonstrated. One time he had flattened his chakra into a disc that had stretched the latex past its breaking point. Another time his frustration with the seemingly impossible exercise had led him to popping the balloon with a concentrated spike of futon chakra. Ironically enough, both failures had resulted in new chakra manipulations that Naruto could call his own. The futon spike would be particularly potent in close combat. Jiraiya had left him with a condescending pat on the head when he had explained himself, and only said to keep up with the attempts to pop the balloon in the proper way. Which led Naruto to where he was currently, sitting cross-legged in the middle of one of Konoha's many training grounds with a water balloon in his right hand. It's gotta be a sphere, the blonde mumbled. The water was rippling at too many different points at once for it not to be. Gotta be big enough to pop the balloon too. Eyes focused on the balloon in his right hand, he gripped his wrist to steady himself. With a single exhale, chakra began to rotate inside the water-filled sphere, slowly building up speed. A single ripple appeared on one edge, bringing a determined snarl to Naruto's face. With a grunt, his chakra began to rotate faster, the sphere made larger. A second ripple appeared. Then a third. And a fourth. In a matter of 5 seconds, the entire surface of the water balloon was bubbling satisfyingly. Naruto removed his left hand from his right wrist slowly and carefully, managing to maintain the proper spin without the steadying hand. The smallest of smiles broke across the blonde's young face as he surveyed his hard work. Now how to pop you. More chakra would make more bubbles and stretch the latex more, he thought. But trying to speed up the rotation even more might do the same, and with less energy. That, and I don't want to blow the damn thing up in my face, Naruto told himself wryly, thinking on the likely outcome that pumping too much more chakra into the balloon would result in. Faster it is. Refocusing on the still rippling latex, the blonde genin tensed his right arm, focusing intently on the wild chakra spinning the water in every direction imaginable. His life energy responded to his call and began to spin even faster, the surface of the water balloon bubbling in tandem with it. Focus, Naruto. FOC, his determined thoughts cut off abruptly as a slowly emerging presence made itself known at the fringe of his awareness. It hadn't been there even an instant before. Blue eyes narrowed in annoyance, sweat beginning to pour down his forehead, at the emergence while he attempted to split his focus between assessing the threat and maintaining his exercise. His mind reached a conclusion 2 seconds after the presence appeared, and his left arm snapped into action. Deft fingers retrieved a kunai and hurled it sideways towards the bushes. The presence hid itself in faster than normal eyes could track. The matte black knife parted the leaves and disappeared, only to reappear less than a second later as it returned at twice its original speed. Naruto only had time to let his eyes widen before the kunai had embedded itself hilt deep in his chest. An explosion of white smoke followed, and the water balloon dropped to the ground with nothing left to support it. From his place in the bushes, Jiraiya smiled. He maintained the expression even as he maneuvered his shoulders to block a dropping heel that came crashing from the heavens. The burly Sannin didn't even grunt as Naruto's kick found purchase, but grabbed the offending appendage and used it to hurl the blonde unceremoniously into the clearing. The genin hit the ground hard and rolled for a few feet before bursting into smoke. Not a bad play, Gaki, Jiraiya said loudly over the crashing of the waterfall, finally deigning to step into the clearing. But it'll take a bit more than clones and a clever substitution to get the drop on me. Two hands burst from the pond where the water from the waterfall gathered and Naruto pushed himself to the surface with a small grunt of effort. Just trying to get your attention, the blonde said, scowling. How long were you creeping on me for? But there's a secret, kiddo. If you can't notice me sooner you'll never know. The Sannin openly grinned at the sour expression on his student's face before turning serious. What was your objective with that kick of yours? He asked abruptly. Trying to maneuver you to the left or into the clearing, Naruto returned without missing a beat. I had a clone in the bushes and myself underwater to follow up. And if I had moved in some direction other than what you planned? My clone was set to adapt to the situation, and I can always make more. Jiraiya nodded once in acceptance of Naruto's point. Make enough clones to cover all the points of maneuverability in the future. I'm sure your sensei, both of them, tried to teach you to be efficient with your chakra, but you said yourself that you can always make more clones. Not too many shinobi can do the same, and it's better to be prepared for any eventuality than have to adapt on the fly, regardless of how good you may be at it. What seems like a small waste of chakra now might save your life someday. Naruto nodded, his face serious as he digested the words. And use something a bit more lethal than a dropping heel when you're trying to get someone to move, brat. That kick may bruise, but that's all it'll do. The blonde opened his mouth to argue that he wasn't about to use lethal force on his sensei, even if the man wouldn't be fazed by it in the slightest, before he remembered his first encounter with Yamato. You won't succeed unless you come at me with the intent to kill. He closed his mouth before the ridiculous protest he had planned could escape, and nodded in acceptance. Yes, sensei. Fantastic. Jiraiya boomed, his good humor seemingly returned. Walk with me, kid. I've got some serious research planned for today and I'm not gonna miss it for the world. The hot springs again, sensei? Naruto asked, rolling his eyes at the lecherous man's habits. He had been on the women's side of the hot springs almost every day since the Sannin had taken him under his wing 2 weeks previous, barring one day when Jiraiya, being Jiraiya, had removed the cloaking seal on Naruto's arm and the blonde had been chased away by 3 very unhappy kunoichi. A buxom blonde had started making regular appearances in his stead the day after. Not today. You're in for a real treat, my very lucky apprentice. I have it on good authority that there will be no less than 5 exceptionally beautiful women enjoying a relaxing day in one of the nearby lakes. The man trailed off, leaving Naruto a combination of exasperated, disgusted, and, to his growing horror, interested. Well, there are worse things, the blonde boy mused, trying not to be too disgusted at becoming more and more like his sensei day by day. If becoming a pervert was the price Jiraiya demanded for his tutelage, Naruto would pay it every day. Who knows, maybe it'll even the odds with Ino and her damn teasing. With that not-so-unhappy thought coursing through his head, Naruto obediently followed the perverted Sannin as they pushed their way through a copse of trees. Paradise greeted their eyes. For Naruto, the sight of shimmering water that was all but undisturbed tucked away in some far corner of Konoha's lands looked like a slice of heaven. The sun shone brightly into the clearing, setting the moisture that hung on the low-laying tree branches alight like shining diamonds. The smell of morning dew was immediately prevalent to the blonde, the slight breeze that tickled his hair carrying the smell of the forest around them to his nose. A high-pitched giggle that could only belong to Jiraiya shattered Naruto's vision of Avalon. A deadpan expression covering his young face, the blonde turned his attention to the 5 still forms resting on the grass across the water. 2 eyebrows raised of their own accord. That Hyuga's stacked, how does that even work when they're that slim? That one in the purple suit isn't bad either, great muscle tone, I asked that Kurenai-sensei? Naruto's train of thought derailed with the force of a crashing boulder at the sight of the jonin, clad in nothing but a simple black bathing suit. Her body glistened in the midday sunlight, showing clearly that she had been in the water not too long ago, and her inky black hair was slick with moisture as it cascaded down her back, contrasting sharply with her pale skin. Dancer's legs gracefully carried her to a towel that was laid on the nearby grass, each movement hinting at the power lurking just below each lightly toned muscle, waiting to be called upon. She was a vision, gorgeous, her skin all but unmarred, her body a work of art sculpted by years of training. She was the ideal kunoichi in the flesh. Asuma-sensei, mad respect. Now that is a picture worthy of my words, Naruto heard Jiraiya murmur. Who would have thought Yuhi Kondo's daughter would grow into such a beauty? It was his sensei's words that brought Naruto back to his senses. His cheeks flaming, seemingly of their own accord, the blonde hastily averted his gaze, choosing to stare resolutely at the water. Well, this is as good a spot as any, Jiraiya concluded, giving Naruto a slap on the back that nearly sent the boy crashing to the ground. Consider yourself lucky, kiddo. Not everyone gets to train with this kind of view. Wait, we're training here? Naruto asked, incredulous. Jiraiya-sensei, those 5 are all kunoichi, at least one is a jonin, the rest are at least chunin, and there's 2 close combat experts down there. And you want to use chakra that would let them know we're here? Are you crazy? He burst out in a harsh whisper, his mind calling up the information he had seen and digested without consciously registering it. Do I look crazy? Don't answer that, the Sannin quickly amended. Look, Gaki, we're so close to the training grounds out here that any residual chakra those kunoichi feel will get brushed off as just another ninja training nearby. They're not about to come running. Naruto opened his mouth to protest, but hesitated. Jiraiya had far more experience with avoiding the women he spied on than he did, and it wasn't like he could drag the man away to train elsewhere. The Sannin was intransigent when it came to completing his research, and could never be dissuaded from having some fine specimen of womanhood, or a few, nearby to observe. The blonde had tried multiple times, to no avail. At this point he figured it was best just to roll with it and hope for the best. Yes, sensei, the genin grumbled, the note of respect that normally colored his tone noticeably absent. What am I working on today? Most days spent in the hot springs dealt with rectifying his supposed lack of observation skills, for Jiraiya always had nitpicks regardless of how much Naruto focused on his surroundings. Everything from the temperature of the steam to deriving the thickness of the bamboo walls based on echoes was necessary, according to the Sannin, much to Naruto's ire. There was always something he managed to miss. Days where they weren't in the springs, few though they were spent in some training ground or another. Those days were filled with Naruto summarily getting his ass handed to him from sunup to sundown, with any break in the middle being spent picking apart his taijutsu, getting a doton jutsu explained in detail, for Jiraiya used many, or licking his wounds. Such a style of training would be extremely impractical for anyone but Naruto, who could rely on the Kyuubi's chakra to heal him overnight, if not faster. If not for that, the sheer amount of bruising and flesh wounds he managed to accumulate as Jiraiya pummeled him would have been debilitating. It was harsher than any training Naruto had ever been put through, Yamato's taijutsu lessons included, or truly even envisioned. But both he and Jiraiya understood the urgency that lay behind every punch, blow taken, jutsu learned. He was going to be fighting a monster come the 3rd exam. Normal training wasn't going to cut it. Why don't you show me how far you've come with that exercise I gave you, the Sannin said, eyes glued to the 5 women in the clearing. Naruto scowled at the man's lack of attention, but he supposed he ought to expect it by now. The man was blind to most things happening around him when there was a beautiful woman to be ogled, or at least that's how it seemed to the untrained observer. The blonde could never figure out how, but the lecher was seemingly hyper-aware of his surroundings at all times, regardless of what he chose to give his attention to. With that in mind, he pulled out one of the dozens of water balloons he had started keeping on his person. Recalling the work he had been in the middle of when Jiraiya had interrupted him earlier, Naruto gritted his teeth and whirled his chakra into a loose sphere. Ripples along the surface formed immediately, but not enough to pop the infuriating latex. Faster! Naruto commanded himself. His teeth grinding together so much he thought it should be audible, beads of sweat forming on his forehead, the blonde used every ounce of control he could muster to spin his life energy faster than it had ever spun before. More and more ripples formed, the latex surface utterly covered with them. And water suddenly splashed Naruto in the face as the balloon popped in a spray. Gah! The blonde's scream of surprise was cut off abruptly by a large hand over his mouth. They may not think much about chakra being used, but they have ears, Gaki. You wanna let them know we're right here? Keep it down, Jiraiya ordered, his expression ornery. He removed his hand from Naruto's mouth, revealing an expression caught between glee and annoyance. It looked like a grimace. Did you see that, sensei? The genin whispered eagerly, letting his excitement at finally completing the exercise take over. No, I miss seeing you get splashed in the face by water, the Sannin deadpanned. Congrats on completing your assignment, kiddo, only took you a couple of weeks. The white-haired man ruffled Naruto's hair with a mocking smile, eliciting a scowl. What a prick, so, what's next? Naruto asked, pushing his annoyance aside. He barely had time to blink before his hand reached up and plucked a ball headed towards his face out of midair on reflex. Huh? Jiraiya's back was to him, focused anew as he was on the women near the water. Pop that thing. Same way as before, he ordered. The genin narrowed his eyes at the man's back. Seriously, the same exercise? White hair bobbed up and down in time with the man's head nodding, the older man refusing to turn around. Naruto stuck his middle finger out at him, turning to survey the ball. And don't flip me off, Gaki. It's disrespectful. How did he? Naruto's thoughts on Jiraiya's supposed omniscience trailed off as he surveyed his newest adversary. It was squishy and it bounced low when the blonde tested it. The surface was perforated lightly, hundreds of tiny holes were poked in it for some reason that was unfathomable to Naruto. At least that'll give my chakra room. His murmur trailed off, his eyebrows slowly reaching toward his hairline. Could it really be that simple? Rubber equals more density, which means more chakra, Naruto spoke lowly to himself. Narrowing his eyes, he poured his life essence into the ball, every shred of his focus directed at recreating the same amount of rotation that had popped the water balloon. Only with twice the chakra, then 3 times, then 4, then 5. Jiraiya discreetly turned from his research to observe his student just as a ripple formed on the ball's surface. The smallest of smirks crossed his features. Well, I'll be damned. Naruto, too absorbed in his task to notice, finally gave up on increasing his chakra output in increments and poured every bit of life energy he could muster into the ball, his control forcing it into a rapidly whirling sphere. One ripple became 50 in an instant, before the rubber exploded outward with a boom. The blonde fell backwards, grimacing and holding his now burned right hand in pain. Ow. Slow clapping caught his attention quickly, and the genin forced himself into a sitting position. Not bad, kid. That bit ain't easy to get down, Jiraiya complimented. Naruto felt a rush of pride, the Sannin almost never gave compliments. Well, I think that's enough for today. I'll leave you with one last thing. Pro tip, Doton, Dacha Senku was a great way to make a quick escape. With that, the Sannin swiftly disappeared into the ground without warning. The fuck? Naruto shook his head in bewilderment at his sensei's hasty exit. What is he? The blonde trailed off as the sound of light splashing seemed to get closer and closer, and the feeling of incoming chakra presences assaulted his senses. The 5 kunoichi had heard. Oh, fuck you, sensei. Naruto ground out, his eyes wide as he performed the fastest shunshin of his young life. He wasn't a moment too soon, as the 5 women, led by Kurenai, burst through the underbrush, only to be greeted with the sight of strewn latex and rubber. / You gonna be ready? The question from his blonde companion registered but went unanswered in the wake of Naruto's continued slurping. He had finally convinced Ino to get ramen with him and he wasn't about to waste a moment while it was still hot. She had somehow managed to get him to get takeout and bring it up to the top of the Hokage monument. It was their spot, she claimed, as opposed to eating it fresh in the stall. That amount of wait time was unacceptable when the ramen was cooling rapidly, and yet he found himself with the familiar spectacular view that the top of the monument afforded. Mindful of his manners, the blonde boy finished his monstrous bite before answering, "Is that a trick question?" "You tell me," the Yamanaka harangued, eyeing him from the side as she faced the village. "And don't say you were born ready. You're not Kiba and you shouldn't try to sound like him. Naruto contained a pout, put out that the comeback he had skillfully planned was now off the table. At the same time, however, he recognized his teammate's tone. Ino wouldn't be asking any questions about his preparation if she wasn't legitimately concerned. Yeah, I'll be ready. Sensei's got me working on a few things. Why you asking? The answer was slow in coming, prompting Naruto to actually turn and stare at his companion. Ino's sea-foam-colored eyes faced the village, but they were unfocused, appearing to stare at but not see the view that was before her. Her shoulders were tense, her arms flexed, her knuckles white as they gripped the stone beneath her. Hey, Naruto lowered his voice, tentatively laying his right hand on Ino's shoulder. The contact didn't shake her, but her face turned to his, her unfocused gaze meeting his concerned one. What's eating you? Ino blinked at him, appearing to ponder the question. I'm scared, she finally said, the words sounding uncertain as they tumbled hesitantly from her lips. And I don't know why. Her lips didn't quiver, her eyes had no hint of unshed tears, and her body wasn't shaking. She was just tense, coiled like a spring, ready to release in some unknown fashion at the slightest provocation. Naruto blinked in surprise at the unexpected answer. He opened his mouth then promptly shut it, unsure of how to respond to his companion's distress. Ino wasted no time in filling the conversation's lull. I don't get it. We've been on missions where we've been up against guys way out of our league, the girl continued. Her voice was entirely level, without any indicator that she was emotionally distressed. There was Zabuza in Wave, and I don't remember being scared at all. Then in Rice Country, even when Kiba and I were alone, I was focused on getting away, on getting to the next alley and away from the Odonin. I've never felt this way, Naruto. She trailed off, the last sentence sounding like a plea for help to Naruto's ears. It was a plea he didn't know how to answer. What are you afraid of? He asked instead, his mind whirling to find a solution to his companion's problem. Failing, maybe, Ino muttered, her eyes now cast downwards. I don't want to lose. But I don't want to die either. And some of the people in the exam. Hey, Naruto cut her off assertively. None of that crap. You've been training with Yamato for 3 weeks now. You're just as good as anyone else in this tournament. Kiba too. Not you. The quick response caught Naruto off guard, and he paused. There was no doubt in his mind that in a straight fight, and the third stage was a series of straight fights, he would steamroll both of his teammates. It would have been the case before the break in the exam, and would most certainly be the case after his month-long stint as Jiraiya's student. He had widened the gap. But that wasn't what Ino needed to hear at the moment. Don't sell yourself short, he said softly. Both Asuma and Yamato trained us well. You can do stuff with genjutsu that I. Oh, cut the bullshit, Naruto. Ino burst out, slapping him across the chest. We both know that you could take me and Kiba no problem. I'm not worried about fighting you, Naruto. I'm worried about when I fight someone else like you. Naruto was silent, unsure of how to respond to his companion's distress. Every person he had ever fought, with the exception of his short encounter with Orochimaru, he had believed that he could beat. Whether through his skill or the Kyuubi's chakra as a last resort, the blonde had never encountered someone who had managed to push him out of his comfort zone before the fight had even begun. But then I've never fought someone in a tournament before, he realized. I've never known who I was gonna have to fight before it started. There's never been time. Heedless of his silence, Ino kept on. Every mission, every enemy I've ever fought, you've been there. And if you weren't, then Kiba was, or Asuma or Yamato. There's no one but me now. Realization struck Naruto like a hammer blow. Ino, like most Konoha genin, had never had to truly tackle an obstacle without the safety net of their team being there to bail them out. It was the genius of Konoha's system. Success on a mission was almost never entirely on one shinobi's shoulders, it was borne by the team as a whole. The genius of the third exam was exactly opposite that. That's the point, Naruto said with finality. By testing us individually, the Hokage can see what we're truly capable of without our senseis or teammates. Without anyone. It was trial by fire, sink or swim. The genin had 1 month to gather information and game plan for any future opponents, and then they had to execute. In effect, it was a solo mission watered down, though no less lethal in possibility. "You're a crafty bastard, old man," Naruto mused with detached humor. "We're so used to working in teams that it throws us off our game when we're not. Shit like that happens on missions that we're gonna end up leading. If we can't handle it, we don't get promoted." End of. Ino was staring at him with realization. She blinked once, turning her face back to the village with a sardonic smile. "Then I'm already failing," she said. Naruto had had enough. "What's wrong with you?" he exclaimed, throwing his hands skyward. "You're sitting here moping about something that hasn't even happened yet. Where's your confidence, huh?" "Not everyone's like you, Naruto," the blonde girl nearly yelled. Her seafoam eyes were brimming with tears. "We can't all be freakishly fucking strong genin who run through missions and enemies without a second thought. We can't all plow through anything that gets in our way. We get scared sometimes." She trailed off, wiping furiously at the tears that were now freely cascading down her face. Unsure of how to properly assuage Ino's fears, Naruto nevertheless wasted no time in pulling her to his chest. She collapsed against him without a moment of hesitation, burying her face into his shoulder. "I'm just so scared," she whispered. Naruto rested his chin on top of her head and sighed. Give him an enemy to fight and he'd do it in a heartbeat, and yet, a crying girl had him at his wits' end trying to think of a solution. "Get it together, Uzumaki." Unwittingly, the image of Itachi's Sharingan eyes that had been seared into his memory burst forth. The blonde shivered. "I am too," he murmured. "Do you really think I don't get scared too, Ino-chan?" he asked gently. "Yeah, but you just keep on going, though." "I freeze," Ino whispered, almost inaudibly. "When we were in rice fields and Kiba and I were separated from you, we got cornered and I just froze. No weapon, no hand seals, no jutsu, no thought. Kiba was hurt, Akamaru was useless and I just couldn't move." "It won't happen again," Naruto said. "You don't know." "I do. It was a statement of fact and nothing less. I know because you're not gonna let it happen again. Ever." Ino's face lifted from where it was buried in Naruto's shoulder. "How can you just say something like that?" she asked softly, her teary eyes boring into his. "I know you, don't I?" he offered with a quirk of his lips. Blinking once, he turned his gaze outward to the village. "When we first became a team, you said that Asuma talked to you and it changed something. You said you were gonna work harder and you did, right? When you say you're gonna do something, you do it." He felt her nod against him, tickling his chin with her hair. "Well, now I'm talking to you, and I'm saying you're not gonna freeze next time you get scared. I want you to say it, Ino-chan," he finished, turning his eyes back to meet Ino's burning gaze. She broke eye contact for a moment before Naruto's hand on her chin brought her eyes back to his. "Say it." I won't freeze up next time." "Next time what?" he prompted. "The next time I get scared," she whispered, their gazes locked. Naruto nodded. "Now make it a promise." "I promise that I won't freeze up next time I get scared," Ino said with finality. A grin broke across Naruto's face at the proclamation. "Now that's what I like to hear," he declared loudly, planting a wet kiss on Ino's lips that left her sputtering and wiping at the residual saliva. "Idiot," the blonde girl murmured fondly, slapping him on the chest. "Ma, so mean," he griped, rubbing at his chest. Naruto stood up abruptly. "Well, I think this calls for a trip to Ichiraku," he declared. His companion barked a laugh. "We were just there." "Yeah, but that was a long time ago and all the ramen got cold," Naruto reasoned. "You can't eat ramen cold, Ino-chan." She giggled as she rose to her feet. "Fine, but you're still paying." The old man'll just give it to me for free." The whiskered boy waved her off as he started back towards the long staircase that led to the ground, Ino falling into step beside him. He slung an arm around her shoulders. They walked in silence for a few moments before Ino broke it. Naruto? Thanks. I really needed that. Naruto shrugged, unsure of how to really accept thanks for doing something he wasn't all that confident at. He was no motivational speaker. It's whatever. Just remember one thing, though. What's that? He looked at her seriously, locking eyes once more. You can't break a promise, Ino-chan. It's not allowed. // It was well into the night by the time Naruto returned to his apartment. The small one-bedroom suite was tidy, as it always was, but lived in. The low hum of the kitchen appliances was familiar now that the blonde had enough money to leave them plugged in during the day. The curtains rustled in the breeze filtering in through the open window that overlooked the residential street below. Naruto shut the front door behind him quietly, but did not lock it. He turned to face the combined kitchen and living room and stared at the empty love seat that acted as his couch. I know you're there, whoever you are. You can come out now, he said quietly but firmly. Blue eyes were hard and a hand rested next to his twin knuckle knives on his waist. The body of an old man shimmered into existence on the love seat, and Naruto had to fight against raising his eyebrows at the sight. He was heavily bandaged, with only half of his face revealed. The bandages trailed down the entirety of what looked like his right arm, though the end was tucked into his cloak so Naruto couldn't be sure. A cane was laid across his lap casually. Your observation has improved, Naruto. Jiraiya has trained you well, the man stated. His calm, smooth tenor belied his apparent old age, for he looked as old as the Sandaime, and held a note of authority that Naruto immediately associated with rank. And what does an elder Jonin want with me? Naruto asked, taking a gamble based on what little he knew. He was rewarded with a slight upturn of the old man's lips. An educator? Who are you? Naruto asked bluntly, changing tactics. Someone who doesn't appreciate speaking with a clone, the man answered. Before the blonde could so much as blink, the elder had raised 2 fingers to his lips in a half-ram seal and sent a tiny, all but silent bullet of wind through his forehead protector. Smoke erupted where the revealed shadow clone had stood, leaving the mysterious elder alone. Not a moment later, the real Naruto rose from the floor, twin knuckle knives saturated with wind chakra that caused a breeze to pick up in the small space. His appearance elicited another half-smile from the man. It's been some time since I've seen the hien. Your versatility with it is to be commended, the man complimented. You've taken it further than my student imagined when he had those knives designed. Despite the situation and his confusion and wariness, Naruto couldn't help his mouth from dropping open. You trained as Suma, he asked before he could help himself. For a time. Futon users are hard to come by in this part of the world. I helped him refine his skills when he first discovered his affinity. The elder remained motionless on the love seat, regarding Naruto through thin black eyes. And to answer your previous question, my name is Danzo. Naruto, mind reeling from the casual reveal, deactivated his knives, though he kept them held loosely at his sides. And what do you want with me, exactly? Not used to getting house calls from elders with an ANBU guard. The half-smile disappeared, giving way to neutrality and mild annoyance. They're sloppy if they can be detected by a genin. Though you are no mere genin, I suppose. You've complimented me twice and I still don't know why you're here. Can one not simply stop by to commend a young shinobi for his good work? The man was completely straight-faced, giving nothing away. Naruto had no idea if he was joking, but he didn't strike him as the type of man to joke. It didn't fit with his manner. Either way, the blonde had no idea how to respond, so he opted to remain silent. The silence held for a few seconds before the elder's lips quirked in what was the smallest smile Naruto had ever seen. You've come far in a short time, Uzumaki. Dead last in your class to second in a few years, and now the most powerful genin in Konoha. Quite the transformation, wouldn't you say? Naruto remained silent, thrown by the casual assessment of his abilities. He knew he was talented, knew he was strong, but it was unnerving to hear a ranking shinobi say it in so many words. He had never been used to praise. I guess it is, he finally hedged. He didn't think of himself as the strongest genin in Konoha. It was a meaningless title. Walking around with the moniker wouldn't deter the likes of the Akatsuki. Across the room, Danzo regarded him with an impassive stare. One might even wonder what sparked such an amazing turnaround. The world may never know. The pounding of blood in Naruto's ears was almost all-encompassing, the prick of sweat forming on the back of his neck making feel like he was drowning. Could he know? His subconscious screamed impotently. Unbidden, the image of Uchiha Itachi's blood-red Sharingan flashed in front of Naruto's eyes. They will hunt you, Uzumaki Naruto. I couldn't tell you, he responded, his voice somehow leveled despite his alarm. The sound of the words on the open air seemed to reach his ears from a great distance. I wanted to be Hokage when I was younger. Somewhere along the way I realized I'd have to actually be something more than a deadlast in order to do it. Danzo gave the words a slow nod. The pressure in Naruto's head lessened immediately and he gave a slight exhale in relief. An admirable goal you and I have both shared, though you speak in the past tense. Maybe I don't want to be stuck behind a desk, the blonde returned with a shrug. He was rewarded with another slight quirk of the old man's lips. Youth and its fancies of adventure and wonder. A fully formed, sardonic smile split the elder's face. And of power, you'll learn soon enough that the front lines are worth far more trouble than the glory they bring. I don't care about glory, Naruto thought distantly. I care about surviving. That sounds like a warning. Smart boy, you're shrewder than most give you credit for. The blonde was unsure whether or not to be offended. When the old man failed to elaborate, Naruto asked, "And? What are you warning me about, then?" The ensuing silence was heavy for a moment before, war. Naruto blinked in disbelief. Then he blinked again, his mind not quite processing the single syllable that every shinobi dreaded. War, he finally managed to croak. Danzo nodded, unperturbed by the blonde's sudden shock. As we speak, a coalition force from Sunagakure and Otogakure is preparing to attack the village on the day of the third exam, 2 days from now. Naruto shook his head in a vain attempt to clear it. And the Hokage is both aware of the situation and has planned accordingly. The Jonin have all been informed, as well as select Chunin squad leaders, and the ANBU are prepared for battle, the elder stated with authority. You're being made aware of the situation because you have an assignment, A-ranked. Since when are Jonin in the business of handing out A-ranked missions to genin? Naruto wondered distantly. Which is, he asked weakly. Sabaka no Gara is the container of the Ichibi no Tanuki. Naruto started at the revelation. He's like me. He is the linchpin in the enemy's plan, Danzo elaborated. Your mission is to eliminate him. No gray area, no room for error. Simple orders. Naruto had never been more shaken about receiving a command from a ranking shinobi in his life. So that's it? Just kill him. Without the Ichibi's power, the invasion force will have no presence within the village to properly distract from any attempt to break the outer walls. They will be herded into the outer districts and routed. The words were said with the certainty of success, and Naruto, whether due to the underlying confidence or because his own shock hadn't fully faded yet, didn't bother to question them. Why are you telling me this? Naruto asked, his voice a whisper. Why now? Why you? It has been decided that informing the genin competing in the final stage would do more harm than good. The Hokage and I, however, Danzo said, felt that you would be able to exercise a modicum of discretion and responsibility. As for why now? It was only confirmed recently that you would be capable enough to carry out the mission. I merely petitioned for the honor of delivering the task. It is not every day that one gets to meet the most talented member of the coming generation. Even through the haze of confusion and uncertainty that had settled in Naruto's mind, he realized that Elder Jonin didn't simply come and hand out mission orders. He knew the Hokage well enough to know that the old man would call him into his office personally. Something greater was at work here. And when I asked the Hokage about this mission of mine, the enigmatic smile returned, as if the old man was pleased by Naruto's small defiance of his authority. Sarutobi will confirm it. He sanctioned it, after all. Then why not tell me himself? The Hokage is a busy man. And you're not? Naruto returned. Possibly. Like I said, it isn't every day that I get to meet Konoha's future, Danzo said. Naruto paused for a beat, weighing his options. The man was a jonin who looked to be the Sandame's age. Any successful jonin who lived to be that age, let alone have the Hokage's approval to hand out high-level missions, would be, if not extremely famous, known. The blonde had never heard of him, much like he had never heard of Yamato, an elite jonin, before he became his sensei. Last card. Here I thought being in Black Ops would let you keep an eye on anybody you wanted. Silence filled the room at the declaration. Gotcha there, didn't I? The genin thought with relish. Across the room, Danzo was impassive. Abruptly, he rose, his cane supporting him as he made for the door. Indeed it does, he finally acquiesced as Naruto moved aside to let him pass. Opening the door, the old man paused with one foot in the hallway. Good luck, Uzumaki. We'll be watching. He was gone a moment later. The door closed quietly behind him, and Naruto slumped to the floor with his head in his hands. First there was the Hokage's faith in his supposed dominance over the other genin, then Orochimaru's offer of power, followed by Jiraiya's interest, and now he was handed an A-ranked assassination mission. The combination was 1 part flattering and about 1,000 parts unsettling. He wasn't used to getting so much attention in regards to his abilities, whether it positive or negative. Closing his eyes and craning his neck back so that his face faced the ceiling, Naruto barked a laugh. No pressure, Naruto. Yeah, fucking right.
That's it for today. Remember to show your support to the creator of this story if you enjoyed it. If you would like more parts of the story to be uploaded, leave a comment and subscribe to get notified when the story continues. Bye-bye for now, and I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day.